look and see when we go live online. There's this interesting little delay with everything. So it should be going live fairly soon here. But yeah, as soon as you can hear, just go ahead and jump in the chat. Let me know. Let me know if you can hear what's going on, if you can hear my voice. There's not much music yet. We'll see. We'll see if we end up with a patch that we can actually make noise with at the end here. That's kind of the plan. But yeah, so cool. Welcome everybody. It's been a couple weeks. Happy to be back and do another fun little live stream. I wanted to do something a little different this time. I'm a big fan of showing the stuff I'm doing rather than like sitting down and making a plan and planning everything out. And, this is the thing I'm going to prepare in advance. Basically what I'm doing right now, when I got finished with my last gigs, which was 2 weekends ago in Richmond, Virginia, as soon as I got finished with those, I unpatched the whole modular so that I could test out a few new things. I had a new module arrive while I was gone, and I knew that I wanted to put it in the system. I had things kind of set up for it to go in the system, but then I had some other ideas, and so basically I wanted to kind of walk through how I figure out kind of practically what goes in my live setup, and walk through the whole thing of putting it in the live setup. So let's see here. But then I had some other. All right, it sounds like we've got audio from that end. Let me know in the chat. Feel free to jump in the chat, and as always, let me know where you're watching from. And then also, if you have any questions, chuck those in the chat as well, about anything we're doing here or kind of anything in general. Happy to answer whatever questions. And then we will, we're just going to patch together. I'm kind of walk through how I choose what goes in the case, how I choose what goes where in the case, and then kind of walk through the way I patch everything. And kind of like my goal is that once I'm finished patching everything all together, I should be able to just turn it on and everything works. So we'll see. We'll see if we get there. This will be an experimentation for all of us today. But yeah, so welcome. I'm getting this all set up because next Saturday I'm going to be doing the Electro Wave Festival in Colorado Springs. I'll be doing a workshop during the day. I'm not sure exactly where. I think it's at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs campus. It's going to be a workshop on improvised live performance. So how to prepare and set up systems in order to be able to use those systems for improvising and playing live. So let's see here. Just started down the modular rabbit hole, so this will be super helpful. Awesome. Welcome, Peter. Good to see you, man. Hello, Berlin here. Awesome. I will be in your neck of the woods in about a month and a half. Be in Berlin from the 1st to the 12th or 13th of May. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. So anyway, in Colorado Springs, I'll be doing a workshop during the day and then playing their closing party at night. And the workshop is going to be kind of a mini version of the course that I teach on improvised live performance, which if you're interested in that, there's a link in the description of the video. You can go to circlelive.com/courses and get signed up. There's a new cohort that's just about to start. It's actually, all the videos are live right now. So there's like 50 videos for each one of the 2 courses that I do. And then there's twice weekly group Q&A calls, and those actually begin on Wednesday. So if you get signed up now, you won't miss anything. We'll be able to get going right now. And actually there's a special going on right now. So if you sign up for either of the courses, the improvised live performance course or the hybrid production course, normally they come with one 1 hour one-on-one Zoom lesson with me. If you do it now, you get an extra one. So it's pretty cool value. So go ahead and get signed up, circlelive.com/courses. And that's going to be what the workshop is on, is kind of a condensed version of that. Obviously, it's 50 videos and 8 1-hour group calls plus one-on-ones plus feedback. So it's like I can't fit all that into like an hour and a half workshop, but it'll be kind of a condensed version of that, and then a show in the evening. So because of that, I wanted to get my modular case patched up. I already spared you the boring side of it, which was getting everything kind of all assembled and put in where I wanted it. If you are into doing stuff like this, you probably know about Modular Grid, but it's the best place to go online, where you can set up a virtual case. You put in like the size of your case that you have, and then you can move modules around and figure out what goes close to what and what fits where. So that way you all you have to do once you get everything worked out is just kind of put it all in the case, and then everything fits generally the way it's supposed to, unless the case is weird, which I have had that happen in the past. So what's different about this case compared with the last iteration of this, I actually pulled out the board brain monitor, which I don't need because I have main outs that come from the Analog Heat Plus effects. So I go straight out from my performance effects, the Oxymeta, straight into that, and then that goes out. So that saved me a little bit of space. I was able to move some stuff from this third row down to the second row because I moved that out of the way, and that freed up space for the Noisite Warp, which I just got 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago or so, and super interesting module. I had my eye on this forever, so I reached out to them, and they were kind enough to shoot me one over to practice and mess around with and see how it works. So I really appreciate that. So thanks, Thomas, if you're watching. And it's really cool. It's a really interesting module, and that was why I reached out to them in the first place, because I was looking for something that did what this does, which is wavetable synthesis, but this also does additive synthesis, FM, AM, and subtractive. So you can kind of do all of them together, and it has the ability to set up the knobs as macros so they can control things within the settings, and then you can save groups, or like you can save a voice once you create it, and then you can save presets within that. So there's a lot that goes on inside this, and I thought it was really super interesting, and it has not let me down. So up until today, what I was doing was I had things kind of sort of patched, like the whole case wasn't patched. You know, I wanted to try this module, I wanted to try out a couple of different effects, which we'll talk about in a sec, and kind of test out that everything worked. So I had a few things patched, but they were just kind of whatever cable I could grab. That was what I patched into it, just so that I could hear things. And so once I was sure that everything was working the way I wanted to, and that it all kind of fit in the case the way I wanted to, then I pulled everything out. It's kind of the next step in my process, is I pull everything off and I start from a clean slate, and I try to patch the way I'm going to use the gear, which everything kind of changes. It all depends on kind of where each voice is going to go into the mixer, what the effects paths are going to be, and all of that kind of stuff. So that's what we'll talk about today. So it should be fairly interesting if you're into this stuff. I will say this is not a watch me perform live video, so if that's what you're into, this probably isn't the video for you. But this one is more for the nerds who want to kind of go behind the scenes and look at the nuts and bolts of how you set something up. Because I think most of what you see online is people will pre-prepare things. They'll have their kind of set, this is what the video is about, and they'll edit down anything that's not super interesting. So you don't get to see a lot of this behind the scenes stuff. And I think for a lot of people, whether you're just getting into modular or whether you've been doing it for a while, or even not modular, just even hardware synths and live performance and stuff, there's a lot of stuff that just people don't talk about. They just assume you know it, and they always want to show off like a piece of gear, or do a review, or do a live jam or, show off how cool they are. I don't know, whatever it is. But the whole purpose for me of this channel is to try to help people out with the things that I've struggled through, and figuring out how I wanted to set things up and how I wanted to use them in the best way for me is something that's taken a long time, and it's kind of been a pain in the ass. So I wanted to help people not have to have that same struggle. So that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this seemingly odd thing. I mean, one of the last videos I did was how to pack your gear for traveling for a show. And again, it's one of those things that's just like, people don't talk about that. They talk about, here's the spec sheet of this hot new synth or whatever, but that's not necessarily my thing. So anyway, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. As I mentioned, let me know where you're watching from. I love to hear kind of how far around the world things go, and happy to answer any questions as we kind of go through this. And then we'll check the chat right now, and then we'll start to look into getting patched. James, what's going on? Welcome. Respect for sharing your techno skills. Thanks. Today's going to be more about sharing my patching skills, which are marginal at best. Digitone gone. No, it's actually on the table right over there. I switched it out because I was doing some different stuff here, and I'm still debating back and forth which is going to be the box that sticks with me for live performance. They're both amazingly capable. I love them both, but there's a moment here where there's certain things that I want samples for that I can't do within my case yet, and I can't do obviously with the Digitone because it doesn't do samples. And so that's why I have this for right now. It may be Digitone in 1010 black box. It may be Digitone with a 1010 bit box in my case, if I can make that work at some point. Or it may be the case more or less like this, but with the D-Attack. So I just haven't made up my mind yet. So that's why I like to try things and kind of see how they feel before I make a big decision, a big leap into things. So let's see here. How about the analog heat? How would be the best way to set it up in a Midi mixer? Just run the mixer output through it, or as an insert for live performance. So I use it as a fully end of chain. So I don't use it as an insert or as a send effect. I use it as I go out from the main outputs of the whole case into the heat, and then from the heat out to the house where I'm playing, or in this case it goes into my mixer here in my studio. So the setup that I have for it is really made for that, as something that goes on the end of the chain that is final processing, kind of like pseudo mastering. As much as you can pseudo master live, it's not a very easy thing to do. So that's how I have that set up. I generally, so the preset that I do with this, if you have one of these, these things will make sense to you. So I'll just walk through it really quick. I use the second saturation, the second circuit, the one that's called saturation. So it's kind of light, and all it does is fill out the frequency spectrum and make things sound, have a higher perceived loudness. So I go through that. I put a little bit of drive. I put a high pass filter, and I bring that cutoff down to about 20, 25, 22 hertz, kind of whatever feels right. And then I add some resonance. And so that gives a resonant boost between like 30 and 50 hertz. And so it gives you a lot beefier low end. And in order for it to not sound too low end, I then use the EQ, the high of the EQ. I add some additional highs just to balance out the lows. So like when I would master, I tend to dip the mids so that it doesn't sound as muddy. This way I boost the low and boost the high, and then that allows me to kind of get that same idea of dipping the mid. And then I use the Heat Plus effects. So it has a bass mono feature. So I use that to mono everything below 200 hertz. Generally, things are fairly mono coming out of my case anyway, but anytime you use effects that are stereo or things like that, they're going to have, messiness down in the low end. And so I try to mono that out just so that random low those random low sound waves from like an effect or something don't phase cancel with, say, a kick or a bass and then make everything sound thin. So I try to put it together as everything monoed in the low end. So yeah, and that's kind of it. That's all I do. It has a compressor, but I don't use it. I have it switched off because, I think putting a compressor on your main for a live set, particularly an improvised live set, is not a good idea. And we can talk more about that if you want to. Otherwise, I don't need to go into my whole soapbox about that. But I don't usually do that. And so I just switch it off. It's there, but I just don't use it. Yeah. So any other questions, pop them into the chat again. And other than that, let's start to go through a little bit about how I patch. So I like to patch individual voices one by one, or patch the into signal paths one by one. So maybe you do all of your audio, or maybe, and then you do all of your triggers or whatever. For me, I like to do voice by voice. I have a few things that kind of help me cheat. If you look down here where I have the tape on my mixer, I have a couple little codes for myself. So like next to the name is a number. So kick is 1. That is not only channel 1 here, but it's also CV1 and gate 1 coming out of the Oxy 1, and it is channel 1 in the Oxy 1. So on the bottom, if you look here, I've got like you can't really see that. Well, anyway, I have here, I think overhead, you might be able to maybe push it forward. Yeah, so you can see the tape down here. So I have these numbered 1 through 8 on the side. So track 1 for me is on the bottom. And so again, I try to keep everything organized so that when I'm playing, I can kind of look at it and say, oh, okay, I know exactly where that is. And I don't have to think like, oh, is this here? Is this here? A lot of people will, when they patch their case, they'll use different color patch cables for, some for CV, some for gate, some for modulation, things like that. Or they'll use one color for a voice so they can trace things. And it's easy if you kind of take a look at stuff, you can see where it goes. I don't do that because I like all black cables for a couple different reasons. One, because I like it aesthetically, but also because I find it way less distracting to have all the cables black so that I can see what's on the individual modules, the labels. So if I'm not sure exactly what something is when I reach for it, I can go back in and I can take a look at it and see it. And most of the writing on these is white. So if you have cables that are gray or white, you won't see all that writing as well. But when it's black, you can kind of see through and see exactly what it looks like. So other than I like black, obviously, but that's kind of the reasoning behind doing the all black cables. How do you select ambiance? I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Could you be a little more specific? And I'm happy to answer that. Peter, as you go through, could you explain why you choose the model you're using? Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of this. So 2 new modules, actually, I should say 3, although 1 was already here. So I'll explain that. The warp I'm using because it has a whole bunch of sonic possibilities and the ability to save groups of sounds, and then you have a lot of live playability of those sounds. Generally, I don't have things or don't use things that save presets because I've got that in the Electron boxes, in the Oxy as well, which I don't usually use it that way. And because I don't want to be like digging through presets, I like to be able to sound design on the fly. What's really cool with the warp is that this whole area up here, they call the galaxy. And what it is it's actually 64 wavetables that are completely customizable. You can make your own inside here, or you can import them from other places. And then with these 2 knobs for X, Y, it's kind of like an Etch-a-Sketch. If you played with those when you were kids, you've got one direction, the other. So you can move around and it basically morphs between those 64 I think it's 64, 32. I can't remember. Maybe it's 32 wavetables. So it morphs between them. So not only do you have all of the wavetable itself and what's within it, but you also can morph between them, which is very cool. And so I like that I can set up a whole bunch of opportunities to do things in kind of a sound palette, and then I can dial in where the spot is that I want to be for right now, and then I've got controls, macro controls over that. So that's why I chose this. A lot of firepower in a really it is a big module, but it's still a pretty small space for everything that it does. The other thing that's new is the Proteus from Seaside Modular. This is actually a beta test module. This isn't out yet, although I think it's coming out soon. And you probably won't recognize it because the module itself is blue. It's like light blue. But my friend who owns this company, he knows that all my stuff is black. And so he actually, when he gave me the beta test module, he made a one-off black faceplate for it. So thank you very much for that, Jonas. I appreciate it. So yeah, it's the Proteus. This is it's a really interesting sequencer, and I wanted to put it in just because I was having so much fun with it over the last few days. It was actually in my studio case over here, and I was patching it into my live case to control different voices. And what I want it to be is it is a totally, on its own kind of renegade sequencer for doing really interesting leads, and the way that it works is very cool. The way it uses controlled randomness, which is one of the things I love about the Oxy, but it does it in a really different way that's really fun and really super playable. So I'll have the internal sequencer in the Swarm doing its own sequencing. The Proteus is going to actually be sequencing the BIA. And then everything else is still going to be sequenced from the Oxy one. So everything else that you see in the case, including the Digitac 2, will all be sequenced from the Oxy one. So yeah, so that's why those are new. And then the other new one that's, I guess, kind of new, but it was already here, is if you're familiar with the Versio modules from Noise Engineering, you're able to swap firmware in them. So the Versio are their effects modules. And basically, if you get one of the Versio modules, you then have access for free online to any of the Versio modules. So let's say you buy a delay, but then a month later you change around your patch and you don't need a delay anymore, you need a reverb. Okay, well, you can just change the firmware and now it's a reverb. Or you want to make it be a granular synth, or you want to make it be something else. So you can swap those out. I think there's 8 or 10 different versions. I'm not sure. If you know, stick it in the chat. But there's a bunch of different versions of that. They also have the Aaliyah, which is their voices, their full synth voices. So the BIA, the Manus, and all of those. The new format for those is Aaliyah. Same thing. You buy one and then you can swap the firmwares. So I actually have 2 of the Versios, and I was playing around with them this week, changing both of them around to be different things. I ended up keeping one of them, the Desmodus Versio, which is the reverb kind of ish reverb. It's a tail generator, so it's not really a reverb. It's like it basically takes little snippets of whatever's going in, and then it acts kind of like almost like a grain delay, and it stretches those out, and you can kind of morph it into a reverb, but it's designed to be a reverb. It sounds really great. And then the other one I flashed to a different software, which is the Yester Versio, and that's a delay that has a chorus, that has wave folding, a bunch of cool stuff. It's a clockable delay as well, so it really super interesting. The Desmodus is going to be the reverb for the Warp, and the Yester is going to be the delay effect for the BIA that's going to be sequenced for the Proteus. So that's kind of the way we're going to put stuff together in here. So yeah, that's the first bit about why I'm using what I'm using. So let's see, what do we got here in the chat? Greetings from Berlin. Man, we've got the whole Berlin gang. Perfect timing for you guys today. Okay, ambient sounds, etc. How do you select them and fit them into the mix? So I'll be able to show you a little bit more once we go. So I was using the 1010 black box, and I was recording in kind of atmospheres, and I would leave them in there, and I would kind of filter or pitch shift so that they would fit into a like key and into the mix and whatever, and I just wasn't finding what I liked. And now what I find myself doing more is using the effects modules that I have, particularly the Ghost. Like, that's kind of my go-to for these atmospheric effects, and I have that on a send, so I can send not only individual synths to it, but I can send different amounts of a bunch of different voices to it, and they're all being sequenced in key from the Oxy ones. They're all going to be together, and so whatever goes into that is going to be affected through the whole signal path of the Ghost and then come back. So it allows me to kind of create atmospheres on the fly. Also, these Versio modules are also really good for that. They have kind of infinite reverbs and infinite delays once you get to a certain setting. Like the reverb also has, once you get past a certain point, it ducks the reverb with any incoming trigger, so it gives it kind of a ducking thing, so it helps it fit into a mix, because you can hear the actual trigger that's triggering the reverb, but the reverb gets out of the way for it and still keeps going on. So they're very interesting modules. They've been a ton of fun. So yeah, I'll show you a little bit more about that once we get some things patched up here. Let's see. Damn, man, that's an expensive kit. Yeah, no kidding. It's taken a long time to build this up. Yes, they're definitely underrated. I agree. It sounds awesome. Greetings from Australia. Welcome, welcome. All the way from around the world. Where are you in Australia? Have you told me that before? I used to live in Australia. That's why I was curious. But anyway, welcome. Glad to have you. So actually, what I like to do first before I patch anything, and that's why I wanted you guys to kind of see this view, is if you notice, I have my patch cables kind of sorted out here. So what I do is I sort them by length. The ones that I like to use, so that way when I go in to patch my case, I'm patching using the shortest length possible, because, well, yeah, the shortest length possible to get around things that I need to get to. The way I patch my modular, I'm not big on kind of draping. So from what I've seen, there's two kind of different schools of thought on patching a modular for using it for performance. One is the use very long cables so that you can move them out of the way and get through them very easily to get to things. So that way, even though they look like they're in the way, they're actually not, because they're very easy to get through and get out of the way. The other school, which I tend to do, is basically to keep everything very tight, but to use different lanes within the case in order to get things to places. So for example, with the mixer here, all of the inputs are over on this side. So if something was going to say come from over here and go to this, I would want to make sure that it comes down and it goes down this middle lane and into here. So that way I keep these rows of cables between things, and it keeps the faceplates clear so that I have access to everything that I need to. The worst thing for me is if you wanted to get, like, let's say from here to here, would be to patch like this, because then you've got something that's, or even worse, to get over to here. So you've got something that's really tight, and you can't really move it out of the way without pulling it out, and you're blocking a whole bunch of other things. So if I needed to get to that same thing, I would do something more like from here, and I would go around to this, and then later on, once I get things all set, I'll kind of loop things together so that they would go around stuff like this. So it would be a path like this, so it stays out of everything's way. Sometimes there's modules that you don't need to get to very often, and so with those ones, I don't have a problem patching over the top of them. So like, for example, the I/O, this I really only use when I'm patching out to multi-track for recording, or to get, the random like kick out or something like that. So if I need to go, from here to here, I don't mind going over the top of that one, because I don't need to get to it anyway. But sometimes if something is going over this, I'll move it here, so that way it gets me kind of the space I need to get around stuff. So anyway, going back to my kind of little cheat system here. So I have the name of what goes on the channel, and I change these tapes up all the time, which I'm going to need to change this one because I changed a voice. So generally what I'll do is I'll keep that number next to the name wherever it's being sequenced out of this, or where it's coming out of the CV in gate, or just having it here. So for example, what's going to go on this one, I'm actually not sure how I'm going to do this. So yeah, if let's say, for example, I had something in here, like if we were going to put the warp on channel 3, this one is controlled by Midi. So I don't need to know which CV and gate it is, but it's still going to be on channel 3 here. But in that case, as I'm patching out of here, I wouldn't send CV and gate to a voice from 3 so that doesn't kind of confuse things. I always want it to go together so that if something goes wrong in a live set, if I lose a sound or if I lose, control over a particular voice, I can look and see, is there something weird about how it's routed in here? Is it a bad cable? Is it, what got disconnected? And so being able to keep those numbers all lined up is just a way for me as kind of a shortcut, to be able to problem solve and troubleshoot when those things come up, because inevitably they always come up. So generally, that's how I start. And I like to start with the shortest cables possible. I also am pretty partial to these 90-degree cables. Whenever I can use them, I just like how they lay flat. Keeps everything kind of out of the way. I worry a lot less about them snapping off when I travel, which would be a nightmare. These ones are awesome. These are from a friend of mine here in Colorado who has Luigi's Modular. And these are the Luigi's Modular cables. I can't remember what they're called. Can't remember the name of I know it's Luigi's Modular is the company, but the cables themselves have a name as well. So forgot about that. But anyway, so generally what I will do is I will take the shortest cables that I can to get from one place to another. So let's just get started with the kick. First of all, battering ram kick, it's on channel 1. So we want it to be CV1 and gate 1. So if I go into CV1 and I want to go to velocity, which is because I don't do pitch on this, I do velocity instead of pitch with CV. So that shortest cable will reach right there. Remember, I can go over the IO because I don't have to get to that later on. Then I'll do the same thing, one from the gate, and that's going to go to the trigger input. And so those kind of lay nice and flat. Then I like to go the next step, which is patch this voice all the way till the end. So this isn't going through any effects. It has its own, it doesn't go through a filter either, because I can take care of that with the drive and kind of shape the sound that way. So this one can basically go from the output straight into the mixer, except the fact this particular module is really, really hot, meaning that the signal coming out of it, I think is like, I want to say like 10 volts. Like it's a really strong, really loud signal. And so because of that, and I don't want to clip my mixer, I learned that, from messing around with this a little bit. So what I do is I put this through an attenuator. So I have an attenuator right here. I would go from the out of that to the input on one of the channels. I'm going to use this lower one because I'm going to use these top ones for something else later on. So this goes into that attenuator. And then I can't reach with a small cable, you can see, to get back to my little channel that I like. So now I'm going to take the next size up from that, and go from the output of there into input 1. Now you'll see that these get a little bit messy, and that's fine. We'll take care of that later. But I always want to use like the shortest cable that I can here, and I'll wrap these a little bit later on once we get there. So this won't stay this messy. But for now, it'll just kind of have to sit there, which is cool. At least it's kind of in the section where we want it, which is going to be in this lane that goes between that. It's always something too that I always think about when I'm deciding what modules go where. Some modules, as you will see in the case of the Oxy Meta, it has its inputs on the top. And then there's other modules like these that have their inputs on the bottom. So sometimes you have a choice. There's certain modules that you can flip upside down. I think the 410 I can flip if I want to. I just didn't do it. So with those, I like to keep the connectors closest to that lane that I'm going to be using. So particularly here, we want the connectors to be there and not on the top, which they are with the 410, but it's okay because of the way that I'll route this, and you'll see that again a little bit later on. But anyway, like for example, if the oximeter was to be here, things would have to come across to get to it, and then the signal, or then the cables wouldn't be as neat. This way you can kind of go down the lane and connect right at the top of it. So anyway, that's why maybe it's stupid, but that's kind of the way I like to connect stuff. Let's see here. You're in Melbourne. Awesome. Didn't realize you lived there. Where were you? I was all the way up top. I was in the Whitsunday Islands. I was managing a resort there years and years and years ago. Hello from Argentina. Awesome. Buenos dias. Jan, awesome. Greetings from Ghent, Belgium. Sweet. I will be in Belgium as well when I go for Super Booth. I'm going to be playing in Brussels on the 2nd. So I will be in Berlin on the 1st and Brussels on the 2nd. So if you're around, come check it out. So anyway, this gets our first voice CV and gate into the battering ram into an attenuator, so I can kind of turn down that signal before it goes into the mixer so I don't clip things. And then I'm going into channel 1 in the mixer. So one voice done, right? If I was to push play on this, let's see if I have any things. Oh, you know what? I don't have all the audio connected. I'll do that in a little bit. So anyway, voice 1. Then we go to voice 2, Archer's rig. Same thing. And we start to move a little bit farther away from there. So to get from 2 here, I can't get all the way over here to the tune, which is this one. So again, we're going to go the next size up. And this is why I like to keep these in order of the size. So then I'm going to go from CV2 over here into the tune. And again, coming across the IO is not a problem. Going down into this channel and then up into where it's going to be. So that keeps the face of these and the knobs open so that I can get to everything that I want to. Let's see if we can reach this one. Yeah, so this one works. So I can go from 2 across to the trigger. So again, we're going, this is a lane and this is a lane. So we're trying to keep everything open here. And so far, we're doing a pretty good job. And you see that you're going to start to lay these cables next to each other. One thing that we'll do later on, once we get a bit farther along in the process, is we'll go through and start to wrap some of these around each other. So that creates like a little bit more tidy thing going down that way. And again, feel free to put any questions you have in there about what we're doing or about kind of anything else. Happy to do that. I was going to do this anyway, so I just figured I'd turn on the live stream. We can talk about it together while we do it, and I can answer questions about whatever you want at the same time. So now I am not sure what I want to do with this. So this is where I used to have the Ericsson's baseline. I pulled that out to put the Proteus in, which is a sequencer, so obviously I don't need a voice for that. So I can either put the warp here, which is what I will probably end up doing, or I can put the warp where the polycinematic was, which is what the warp replaced. But I think I'll keep it there because it makes a little bit more sense where it is in everything. So this is connected via Midi. I don't know if you can see this cable right here. TRS Midi cable coming from the Oxy split. Can you see that? Let's see. Yeah. So it's coming out of the Oxy 1 to the input here. And then I have this going out to the warp. And then I have a second one that's going out into the Digitact. So that allows me to have separate MIDI channels going out. This is the Oxy can do 48 channels of outgoing MIDI. So it has A, B, and C, and each one of those has 16 channels. So it's just an easy way to keep it separated, and you don't have to worry about weird signals going to different locations and messing with each other. So I think we're going to do the warp. So that's connected in via MIDI. So it's not going to be on 3 in here, although I could, and I will still keep that lane free for it. Right now it's on its own sequencer, and I'll just figure out how I want to do that later. But I may put it on 3 just to keep everything on one page, which is kind of nice. So yeah, so we'll do that. And that one is going to go through the Modus Versio and then into channel 3. Oh, wait a minute. We didn't do audio out from the Archer's rig, which is, does this reach out to 2? Yes, it does. Because yeah, these are mono, so I only need one cable going to those, so that's kind of handy. This for me counts as a lane as well, because you never have to access this, you never have to reach through to get something. So however this kind of crisscrosses within these sections, it really doesn't matter for me. As long as I keep this clear and keep the mixer clear, we're good. Let's see here. Why this mixer versus some? I will go into that for sure. Sorry, YouTube mobile is a pain in the ass when typing. Oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's all good. All good. So yeah, the Board Brain mixer, I'm a big fan of what they're doing with Board Brain. They focus on mixers. That's really all they do is mixers and things that attach to mixers. They're not making all of the other modules, and then they decided to just put a mixer as well. And they are live performance artists as well. And so they really made this to be a very performance-oriented mixer. So functionally, it has, interesting things like the effect sends are large, which is cool because you actually use them a lot during performance. The pots all feel really nice. It's an all analog mixer. I like the way that they have these connectors on the back, so you can add different things. So basically, on the back of this, I'm connected to the XP3 via ribbon cable on the back. So all 9 of these channels all share the same send A and send B, or effects 1, effects 2, whatever you want to call them. And that's handy without having to patch anything. You just leave it connected behind. Then there's also the Exelon XI3, which this is new. I don't even know if this is out yet. I don't think it is. And if it's not, they're shipping it now, but I don't know if they've shipped it yet or not. But anyway, it's about to come out. And this is 3 more channels which connect to the back. And you've got effects 1 and 2, so the same effect sends, and a volume knob. So you don't have sliders, and you don't have gain, and you don't have panning on these. So what I use this for, these 2 cables coming in here are my left and right out from the Digitact. So I use this anytime I'm using an outside instrument and I want to bring it through the same mixer so I can use the same performance effects. So for example, if I have the 1010 black box, I'll connect that into this as well on its own channel, and I've got kind of volume control, so I can get it to fit properly in the mix. And if on the weird chance that I wanted to use one of the effect sends, they still have the effect sends for everything that's coming in. I don't generally do it from the Digitact because there's generally a lot of things coming in at once, and so the effect sends would just get really sloppy. But sometimes with the black box, if I'm just using one single instrument, I'll use the effect sends on here. So it's interesting. And it's also, I played live with a friend of mine recently in LA, and when we played, he had his whole rig through a mixer coming down to a stereo pair, and we just ran that stereo pair into one of these channels. So that brought his whole mix into my mix. So then I could use performance effects, like, say you want a high pass to do a breakdown. I could high pass our entire rig, all of us together, because he was coming into this system. Another thing too with this is this IO unit right here is also connected to the back via ribbon cables, and this gives me stereo outputs, pre-fader and post-fader, of all of these channels in the mixer. And I have it set up for these 6 because that's how I did it originally, but you could do you can set it up for all of these just pre-fader, or all of these just post-fader. But having these ones, I was able to do pre and post from these. So that's how I have it wired now. I may change that up now that I've added these expanders. But what that allows me to do is use the mixer in performance while still having access to pre-fader and post-fader outputs. So when I get home from a performance, I can connect this into an audio interface, and I can multi-track my modular and still use the mixer. So I can perform live, recording that into a DAW if I want to. Or what I use this for in performance is, for example, like you just saw the kick is on track 1 here. So that means 1 here is a pre-fader output of the kick. So what I do often is I'll take an output from that and I'll bring it over into an input in the dig attack and use that to trigger the sidechain in the dig attack. So I can sidechain everything. So whether the kick is in or out, because it's pre-fader, it's sending it out, so I can get all of that over here. And so that's why this mixer, I just like that you can mix and match. And this is only a fraction of the options you have for kind of these peripheral modules, but they're all really designed as kind of a mixer ecosystem and not like a full line of modular. So yeah, so anyway, I really enjoy it. It's got some other cool functions. We can talk about it as well if you're curious. One of the other ones that's really cool, by the way, is not only is it all analog, but every channel is stereo, which is not a big deal for me because I don't do a lot of stereo stuff. But what you can do if you don't do stereo is if you put 2 mono signals into a channel, they will share the fader and share the effect sends, but you can engage right here a crossfade, which turns your panning into a crossfader between the 2 inputs. So yes, they share a fader, and yes, they share effect sends, but you can mix them together. So what's really cool with this is, let's say you had 2 different kicks, right? So let's say you had like I used to do the analog rhythm. I would use all the time a 909 kick sample and then a kick synth that I would layer with it, and I would put them together to make my own kicks. So with this, if I had a kick sample, I could have that in one side, and then I could come out from my battering ram kick into the other side, and then you can use this balance knob to basically crossfade or morph between those 2. So you're mixing 2 signals together, and then they still obviously use the same fader. So you've still got your kick, but you've got just like an infinite amount of kicks at that point. And you can do the same for hi-hats and really anything that you've got that's mono, that you might want to have some additional sound design capability. It's a pretty cool function to be able to do that. So anyway, let's see. Super flexible. It is totally. I mean, that's why I am where I am with it, is that it's just such a flexible thing. And I'm big on being able to kind of create my own workflow. It's hard for me sometimes when I'll use like software or hardware where there's only one way to work and you have to change your whole way of working in order to work with it. And what I love with this is that I can customize this, right? So like I use the IO, but some people might not. There's a version of the IO that has 1/4 inch outs instead of 3.5 millimeter. Cool. If that's what you want, swap them out. They have another one that's called a, what is it called? Oh, it just totally went out of my head. I'll think about it. But it's an ADAT output. So for example, if I had the ADAT output right next to the IO, I could patch little tiny cables right into it and then send one ADAT cable to my mixer. And I can still use my mixer when I perform live, but I can also multi-track at the same time. Whereas with a lot of them, like if you were going to use a mixer with say an ES9 in order to get that out to multi-track into a computer, you have to unpatch from your mixer and then patch into the ES9 because most mixers don't have outputs. Some like the WMD Performance Mixer and the Mark II have a side module as well that you can do the same thing where you patch it behind and then you can patch out to those things as well. But you have to choose with those whether it's pre-fader or post-fader. What I love with this is that you get pre-fader and post-fader that you can have access to at any time you want. So let's say you want post-fader because you want to actually record, multi-track your actual performance when you faded things in, when you had, brought things out, and when you panned things or whatever. You can do that with the post fader. And the pre-fader is obviously what most people would use because then you just get like a standard thing and then you spend more time in the DAW kind of sorting stuff out. So very handy, really, really interesting. Oh, that module is called the optics. It just like popped into my head because it's an optical cable, which makes a lot of sense. So it's, you've got ADAT in and out. So you can patch from this to do your outputs, but then you can also come into your modular from, let's say, a laptop if you were doing that, and you can send, if you use CV tools in in Ableton or in Bitwig or something like that, you can send CV through the optics, and then you can patch out from that module into your case as well. So there's like a lot of different possibilities with it. The whole point is that it's really flexible and you can kind of mix and match. You can add more of these add-on modules if you want, and kind of chain them together. So this is plenty for me, but let's say you have a huge setup. It's pretty handy. So anyway, so we're 2 modules in, 2.5. So the warp, basically all we're going to do from the warp is patch it through the Dismodus and go into channel 3. So this is going to be pretty much all short cables. With this case, it's pretty handy because I can use an actual lane down here. So I can go out one like that. And I'm just going to keep this one mono because I don't need the stereo signal from there. I've got the Dismodus to do kind of stereo stuff. So I'm just going to go into there, and then I'm going to take that and go over here to channel 3. Now, how do I get to channel 3 from there? How long of a cable do I need? Looks like this one might be too short. Yes. So I'm going to take these slightly longer ones, and this will get me from left out, again, around the face plates and over here to input 3. So you see it just barely is long enough to get around there, but that's enough because I'll be able to attach it to some other things over here. So I'll still be able to use this. Another thing you can do too is just like put things, tuck them underneath things like that. So that way it'll kind of hold it out of the way. So that's going to be 1. Is that same size? There we go. We're going to do the same thing here. Go to the second channel. And this one, I may swap this one out because that's not, that's a little bit too close. But I don't want to go too big. This one's huge. That's still pretty long. Let's see if we could use one that is not a, no, that's still going to go over. So I guess we may use the tight one, and we'll just kind of, we'll figure it out. We'll move it out of the way as we need to. See how that works. Yeah, maybe these end up coming up like this, so I can still get access to all those. So we'll figure that out. Again, I can always move a patch cable later on if I need to. So, hello. Let's see, patch the I/O pre-fader into ES9. Yeah, that's great. And that's the thing. The ES9 is basically like the optics. They serve a very similar purpose, and so with a mixer like the Exelon, you can get these pre-fader things outputs, and then you can use whichever output you want. So ES9, ES8, ES10, kind of depending on the connections that you have, or the optics, or you can just patch directly from here into an audio interface. So there's a lot of different options, but the key part of it is being able to have that connected behind and kind of always there and available for you. Because it's just really handy to have those outputs and just be able to plug right in, not have to worry about unpatching or connecting something else on the back or going to the back and moving a switch or whatever. It's pretty handy to do it this way. Let's see here. Small system, 84 HP, 6U, and 104 palette. Taking so much space with this hurts my soul. Yeah, I get it. Since the mixer has no EQ, how do you do that in your rack? I don't. That's the simple answer. I don't EQ. I don't have any way to EQ other than using individual filters within here. So something we talk about in my course a lot is when you can't EQ per track, as most of us can't with the live hardware setup, you have to be a lot more conscious about your sound selection. So you have to pick sound sources, whether it's a module, whether it's samples, whatever, that fit within certain frequency bands so that they don't overlap with one another, so that you don't end up having to do things like EQ and compress and sidechain and all that stuff afterwards to clean up messes that you created by sloppy sound selection. So like when you're in a DAW, you don't really have to think about that. You can be as messy as you want, and you can kind of chuck things in because you can always fix them later. You can always EQ them later. You can always, sidechain something out of the way or whatever. Very difficult, if not impossible, to do with a modular. So because of that, I tend to really focus on sound selection from the beginning, so that you don't have to EQ after the fact. Okay. Yeah, EQ each voice to taste. I don't. I select each voice, or every voice that I have, I can really dial it in to the to my taste for that particular thing. One thing I just thought about. So everything's coming into the mixer, right? The mixer has output A and output B. You've got effects send 1 and 2. You've got effects returns. All on this section over here. What I need to do in order to make it so that we can hear sound is I need to go from this output into the inputs over here. So I am going to do that with, I think I needed these ones, maybe. I have a little random box of cables over here too. These are my slightly longer. I don't like them as much because they're not as pliable, but they work well to do exactly what we're doing here, kind of get things around. So now I've got output A going into the Oxy Meta and the Meta going out to there. So now you should be able to, yeah. So we've got sound, which is great, coming from the kick. Let's see if we've got sound. All right, sound coming as well from the Archer's rig, and I just noticed I messed up with the Archer's rig. So I don't need to go directly out. I'm gonna go out and into this effects module, which is right next to it. So it's gonna go just into the left again because it's mono, and then I'm gonna take that signal back from there into the channel where we were, back into channel 2. So, and you can see it's a bit long. Again, we're going to use this to wrap later. So I'm just going to loop it out of the way for right now. And that's going to give me so then I've got dual effects with the FX aid for the Archer's rig. So that allows me to do that. So 2 channels, they're already working the way they're supposed to, which is cool. Then we've got channel 3, which is our warp. And I think this is just like some random sequence that I had in there. So this is again coming from the warp into the Dismodus Versio, so we can add some reverb. And it's more like a delay when it's on this side. So here it's kind of like a bit of a delay, but then as you move this over, it kind of smears and becomes much more of a reverb. And you have filter control over that. So again, we were talking about a minute ago about EQ. How do you EQ things? I don't, but I have modules, for example, this one, which has basically like a DJ style filter. So you can high pass, so you can get just the top part of the reverb. You can also set this up on shimmer mode. So it adds an octave up. So that's kind of cool. Or if you wanted this to be lower to fit better in your mix, You can EQ your reverb to be more on the low end, or you can keep it just right in the center, however you want. So, 3 voices now patched in, everything patched in and working the way it is supposed to. So then we'll continue on. So the next one is our Bastel Pizza, which is right here. This is going to act kind of similar to the other ones. It has its own filter and it has its own effects. So that means there's going to be some short cable action going to the on the output, but on the inputs, we're getting a little bit farther away now. So we skipped 3 again because I don't want to have a 3 CV that is not the same as the 3 here. So I'm just going to skip it. I may use it for something else, for some modulation or something that doesn't have to have its own channel. But so what I'm doing is I'm going to go into 4 here, and that's going to come from that over to the volt per octave. So again, through this lane that's down here. And then I think I can reach, yeah. So from the 4 here, this is going to go over to here. So that's going to give us our input for the pizza. And you can see, again, a little bit of slack here so that we can wrap these later on, which is cool. So once I get something that's really long, that's way too long for the reach, then I'll use that to wrap, which we'll do in just a little bit. So we've got CV and gate both in there. Then we're going to take some of these shorties, go from the main output into the in on this filter. I'm just going to tuck this guy down here so we keep it neat. We're going to go from the out. I like to use the 4-pole out. So we're going to go from that output to the mono in on this. And then we need to get all the way back across here and to channel 4, which is actually here on the top. So that might not be that far of a stretch. Let's see if we can do it with this guy. Yep, we can. So that's going to go here. And again, we've got some slack here, so we can use that to tighten some things down, right? Go there. So yeah, so what I may do is I may just take these and already start to loop them a bit. So I'm going to look where there's some things like this that need to be kind of cleaned up, tightened up, and I'll start to wrap these so that not only are they tighter, but so is that one that we just sent, right? So there we go. So we've got some good clean cables here. We can just wrap these up in a way that keeps those tight and keeps that one from being too slack. So there we go. So now we've got this kind of like this channel down the middle. And we've got this other cable here. This was coming from that. So I may actually just wrap this as well while we're here. So we can try to get tight around all of these. Yeah. And that's going into 2. So there we go. So again, we're trying to keep everything tight in this lane so we keep it out of the way of the knobs we need to get to here and all the knobs we need to get to up there. Again, jump into the chat if you've got any questions or want me to show you anything. I can do kind of whatever. So feel free to jump in there for whatever. So we've got 4. Now we can go ahead and give this one a try. So start to get some sounds out of that, which is pretty cool. So we've got our pizza into the filter, into the dual effects there. So we've got a delay and a reverb. That's how I have that one set up. And then those are all running down and into their proper channel. All right, so next up we have the BIA, which this one, let's see how this is going to go. So the BIA is going to go from here into its filter, into the effects, and then from the effects, it needs to come over here into number 5. So you can see we use a couple different little little small jumps here. Well, actually, let's do the input first. So how far can we reach here? So we're going to go from 5, yeah. So again, 5 CV to pitch. So that reaches, right? So we can keep that one nice and out of the way. I don't know if that's going to also reach all the way to trigger from 5. I don't think so from that size. Yeah, no. So see, here's the thing where I could reach, right? But then it's crazy tight. It's probably going to pull out, and it's going across the middle of those. So what I'll do is I'll pull that one out, and I'll use a longer cable for that. I'd rather use slightly longer than slightly shorter, and I can tuck those out of the way back there, or I can even wrap some of these now. Might be a good time to do that. So you can keep these a little bit out of the way. And then we're going to put it here into the trigger. This one cable is still driving me crazy. So this I may swap out. So these ones all work really well. They all stay out of the way. This one might need to come through here, I think. We'll see. We shall see. That can work in this one because I don't, you can see how I can kind of fit between those. I don't love doing that, but I would rather have it that than go over the top of the battering ram, which is something that I use non-stop. So I actually might do this one the same instead and have these both just run up like that. So this way. There we go. Yeah, so that stays pretty clean. So that's going to stay right in there so I can still access these, and it keeps everything free from these voices that I use a ton over there. Let's see here. How often are you breaking cables on gigs and such? As little as possible. No, like rarely, but it does happen. I always bring extra cables with me, but you never know. I try not to. Let's see. Circo's course is top tier. Awesome. Thank you. Can really help narrow the focus and deepen understanding of the setup and workflow. Thanks, James. James just played his first gig recently after doing my course, which I was pretty excited for. Hope to hear that that went well. Let's see. Wish I had the time and cash. I wish you did too. I think everybody can kind of learn a lot from it. These lives are an amazing resource though. Thank you. I appreciate that. Like, that's why I do these. I was going to do this on myself, and I could just like sit here quietly, listen to music and do this, but I would rather share what I'm doing. So get everybody a little extra help. Let's see here. Peter, without the bass line, what's your go-to sound for lower frequency or bassier stuff? I was about to pull the trigger on a bass line. Leans more towards a 303 sort of sound. It does. It acts a bit more like a 303. It's pretty cool. It's not quite as squelchy as a 303, but it's still pretty good. It's good for doing that. I actually have a lot of options because, like, for example, you just heard with the pizza, this one can be a sound like this pretty easily. Or I can turn it up and make it a lead. So I've got a lot of possibilities there. Also with the warp, this also has a, I'm going to turn down the effects here. This doesn't sound super bassy like this, but it does have an octave switch, which is pretty cool. And I like how you can kind of move by octave and really fit it. Super low, lower than you'd ever want. About as low as you'd ever want a bass. This is probably more in bass territory. So I've got a lot of options between those. Then the BIA as well. The BIA also has octave switch. It's actually each position on the switch is a 2 octave jump, so you don't have quite as much control over it. But it's pretty cool because you can kind of, one of the things that I try to do with this rig is have a lot of things that can be a lot of things. And so that way I don't have to get stuck with, oh, this one thing is only for this thing. And then you end up having to have, a lot of, one-trick ponies that do that one thing really well, but then you have to have other modules to do the other things. So I just didn't want to deal with that. So, and I can also use the Oxy. This has 3 VCO kind of Moog style voice, which is pretty cool. You can detune the oscillators, and that sounds badass as a bass as well. And then obviously the Swarm as well. So really anything here can be a bass, other than probably the Archer's rig. I don't think I would ever use that as a bass. And the battering ram is what it is. And then I also have the Digitact, where I can have different voices that act as basses. So tons of options and possibilities. I just realized something, that I patched the BIA wrong. So I don't actually need these two in here, because if you remember, this is going to be patched from the Proteus and not from the Oxy. So this is going to be our first kind of Proteus patching. So this is going to take a much longer cable because I need to go down and around to get there. So I will probably use this one, although let me try one of these. Yeah, no, that's going to be too short. So yeah, that's not going to work. So we use the much longer one. So we're going to go gate. This is going to come around, and again, I'll wrap these later. I might go around this Midi cable just so that I can hold it in place to keep it out of the way. So this is my gate. This is going to go around here and go into the trigger on the BIA. And then I'm going to use another one. Is that same crazy long size? And that's going to go from my pitch, my volt per octave, around as well. And that's going to go into pitch, right? So now that we've got this patched like CV gate style, now we can actually start to look at the audio signal, which is what I was going to do a little while ago. So let's see here. So if we go from the output of the BIA, we're going to go to the input of the VO Arena. You've got 2 different inputs. I like this input because it goes through the whole chain through the wave folder and everything. So I'm going to go with that one. Then we're going to go with another shorty from the out of there to the left input or mono input on the Yester. Then we need to get from there all the way back around. So I'm going to need another long cable. Do I have another one? I might, but then again, I might not. Yeah, I've got a couple here. That one's pretty long. So let's try this one first. So we're going to go from the out here, left out, all the way around. And again, loop where we can in order to try to keep things neat and tidy, right? Can even loop down here again because it's going to be a bit long. And then this is going to go, we're BIA, so we're going to go into input 5. And then I'm going to do the same with this guy, which is quite a bit less flexible. But what can you do? So then we'll run through here, loop that around, and go into 5. So we should now have, as long as we clock, where's my clock here? So the way I do clock with these, I have a clock output from the back of the Oxy, so like a CV clock. I run that into the clock input on the PAMs over here, and then I use the outputs from the PAMs as different divisions of that clock, like for whatever ends up working the best. So I have a, let's try clocking this from here. So we're going to take an out from that, go up here to the gate in. There we go. And everything lights up. So that means we have a signal, right? So I'm going to shorten up the envelope that's here in the BIA. Then we can start to open this up and take out the effect as well. So again, we were just talking about what can be a bass. So this can be a bass, or it can be a lead, or it can be a kick drum. It can be percussive. And again, like I mentioned, it has octave switch, so you can go up 2 or up 2 more. So you've got a lot of flexibility with that one. And then, so this one can also be a bass voice. So that's going dry through there, but if we start to add something from the yester, again, with these, you've got the ability to filter. So you can get just the high end of that fast delay. Or you can bring it back to center, or you can bring it back down on the low end. And then with the mix, you can go back into hearing some of the original sound. So anyway, that's how different voices can be basses as well as everything else. So yeah, so to answer the question, having the Ericson's bass line is very cool. I've had that module for a really long time. It was one of the earliest modules I bought, and it's been in and out of my case a lot of times. And in this situation, I wanted to add the Proteus in because I wanted to play around with it, which I can show you in a minute about why. And I needed space. So I was like, do I leave the bass line and take out the Swarm and put the Proteus and something else in there, which I didn't want to do? Do I leave the bass line and take out the oxy? And then I was thinking I get way more use in a live set from the oxy because it's 8 voice multi-timbral, and so I can have basically 8 things going on at once. It has samples, it has all different kinds of sound engines, and then again the bass line does one thing really, really well. And so in this case, it was kind of the low man on the totem pole. It was the one that space just didn't allow for it to be in here, so I pulled it out and in order to put the Proteus in. But it's not because I don't like it. And I hear that all the time, like earlier in the video when you guys were talking about I pulled out the Digatone. So it's like I've got a lot of gear here that will come in and out of my setup, and a lot of it depends on what I'm going to play, what kind of sounds I'm looking for, what I'm feeling at that moment as far as like sound design opportunities and all that stuff. So I tend to kind of move things in and out of my setup a lot. And so just because something goes out of the setup doesn't mean I don't like it anymore. It means that I had to kind of do this decision-making process. And I saw a really good thing recently. I don't know if you ever watched Simon Sinek, like the motivational speaker guy. I saw an interview that he did with, who's the guy from the day? Trevor Noah. And he was talking about, he talked years ago with a guy who was a shoe salesman. And he was like the top salesman at this really super high-end shoe store in New York. And they asked how he would sell, like what was his secret? And he said his secret was 2, not 3. Meaning that if you've got somebody there and they're trying on shoes, you bring them 2 pairs and they say, okay, can I try that pair? And they say, certainly. Which of these 2 would you like me to put back? And then you take that and you bring the new one, because they found that anytime people had a choice between 2 things, they would buy something. And if they had a choice between 3 things, they would kind of get paralyzed in the decision and not make a decision. They wouldn't buy anything in the end. So for me, I do the same with gear a lot. I'll say, okay, I'm going to weigh this against this. So I want to get the Proteus into here. Is it, I'm weighing the baseline versus the swarm. Okay, the swarm wins. So then I'm going to weigh the baseline versus the oxy. And in this case, the oxy wins. So then I'm like, okay, well then the baseline is the one that comes out. But let's say the baseline won against the oxy. Okay, well then the oxy would come out and the baseline would be there. So I do that a lot because I restrict myself to this 12U84 case because it fits in my carry-on. And I want to have my analog heat, one electron box for voices and drums and sounds, and the oxy one. So in that case, I say, okay, what's the one box? In some cases, I want it to be the Digatone because I'm like, oh, I'm going to play this style, or I'm feeling this vibe, or this is this type of event. So I would like these kind of sounds. And in other cases, it's like, I might want something totally different. So like for right now, one of the things that I wanted for my upcoming gigs is I wanted to be able to have some straight up 909 percussion samples, one shots, because I love 909 hi-hats, open hats, rides, claps, all of that stuff. I love that 909 sound. I also love 808 closed hats. So I like having those samples in here because I can just use those things as a go-to. And I can still make hats in the Digatone, but they don't sound like 909s. So I was just kind of feeling 909s. So that's why the Digitact is here, because that was what I wanted at that time. So things come and go, and it's not because I don't like them. If I don't like something, I'll sell it. I'm not big on keeping gear around that I don't like just for nostalgia. So if I don't like something, it's generally gone, like permanently gone. And the other stuff will kind of work its way out and work its way back in to the case. Same with modular. Like that's kind of what this whole studio modular case is over here, is that's kind of my library. So if I want something and I'm working on modular grid and I'm trying to make something fit and work out, I'll be like, oh, well then I can take this and this and this, and these will fit and they'll kind of accomplish the thing that I want them to accomplish. So yeah. So anyway, that's why the bass line's gone. long explanation. Let's see, where are we at here? You said once you performed jazz. What instrument did you play? And have you ever thought of performing with an instrument with your setup, like keys, etc., for solo or something? So when I was younger, elementary, junior high, high school, I played trumpet. and played in jazz bands then. Then I started playing in middle school. I started playing guitar, and I played everything from jazz to blues to rock to bluegrass to all kinds of stuff on guitar. I played in like blues rock cover bands, playing like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix covers. And while I was doing that stuff, I was listening to electronic music, but I was playing non-electronic music. And then once I got into college, I kind of said, you know what, I want to do the music that I love, that I hear, and not just the stuff that just happens to be what people want me to play. And so that was the first time I had kind of a more electronic based band, and it's kind of kept going since then. That was when I got my first synth and my first drum machine, and played them together with a small duo in college. And so it was, and then I started DJing about that time as well. So it was all, I kind of moved over to electronic at that time. As far as the question of playing an instrument live, I am not, so the type of music that I play, the only thing that would kind of lend itself to that would be keys. And I am a horrible key player. Like I'm much better with sequencers. I'm super inspired by like Jeff Mills and the way that he plays a sequencer like he's playing an instrument, and it's not just like programming and then you press play, but you're actually putting things in and out. You're modifying sounds. You're moving things around, and I like that. And I'm much, much better at that than I am at playing keys. I'm an awful keyboard player. So no, I would not include that in my live setup. Plus, I try to keep my live setup really small so that everything can go in a carry-on, because most of my gigs I take a flight to get to them, and I don't want to travel with keys. I don't want to travel with a big synth or keyboard. I have some here in the room. I don't know if you can see behind me. I have synths over there that I play and that I use for like production, but it's not. It's never really been part of my live performance, just because. Like I tell people in my course all the time, lean into your strengths, and that way you can make something that's really good for you. My strengths are not playing keys, so I don't play keys in my live setups. So that's that. What else? Proteus, most interesting change up in a while. Yeah, it's a big swap. I haven't used anything for sequencing since I got the Oxy. Basically, I went from the Metron to the Oxy, and then it's been all Oxy. And it will still remain all Oxy, just so you know. The Proteus is like, it's a really odd thing for me because it's a huge module that's sequencing one voice. So it's a lot of real estate to give up, but it was so interesting for me to see how this thing works, which we can go into this just a little bit. Let me make this sound a little less dramatic so we can kind of listen to this a little bit without it sounding awful. Okay, so give it a little delay. Sounds pretty cool. Little wave folding. Little wave folding in the delay as well. Little chorus. This Yester also has this really cool panning thing, which I don't usually use much because I don't use a lot of stereo stuff, but if you're listening on headphones, you'll probably hear this. It does like a ping pong delay with the delay, which is pretty cool. Then you can add high harmonics. You can also turn the wave folder and add low harmonics. They call that doom, just for obvious reasons, right? So anyway, what I wanted to show you was the Proteus. So if you look at the Proteus, so right now it's being clocked and it's playing an 8-step sequence, which you can change to any length you want. I think it goes up to 128. So on these 8 steps, right now it's playing all of them. This knob right here is density. So if I decide to turn things down, So if I go up to here, full density, I've got all of these. If I start to turn them down, it keeps the same gates. I mean same gates and same pitch, but it just starts taking notes out. And anytime you want to generate a new pattern in key, you can just press this. And because I had it on that low density that only had 3 notes, it will keep those with its new thing. So now I can have this. So now I've got kind of a simple pattern there, but if I start to add in so it still keeps it in that same key and in those same notes. And you can change with different settings how random the pitches go, how far the range is. You can change gate length. And then if you want it to be something, I'm not using the really generative function in this, but it has this thing where this knob right here is called patience. And so basically it will, over time, this button in the middle will change color to pink. When you take the patience knob down, it'll change over time. And then once it gets to pink, it'll change to a new pattern in that same key. So if you're doing generative music or something like that, you can let it on its own and it will kind of do its thing and you still have some control over it. I like being able to control when it changes. And then it also has a lock down here. So when it's locked, it's not going to change anything unless you change it. So that's kind of the settings that I have it on right now, is it's locked. And so then I can change things. So, oops. So if I decide that I want to change something, I can change it. And if I turn this all the way up to high density, I'll turn the effects down so you can kind of. And then again, you can start to take out notes. And then when you start to add in the effects again, and so you can bring in more. And now it sounds kind of cool like that, but where it sounds really cool is when you start doing it with a kick. Make this kind of more of a normal kick. So you can see a ton of possibilities to have the thing that I love, which is controlled randomness. So I can generate something random and I can let that go, or I can just, when I want to change it up, you know, something I was doing yesterday when I was messing with this. What's really fun is you take this, you filter this up, and then you change it. And you come in and you're in a different pattern. So just being able to have that amount of flexibility to mess things around, specifically with leads, right? Because like I like to use my sequencer here for doing things that are a bit more sparse, kind of call and response type of sounds, but to be able to generate some really cool rhythmic patterns. And because it's going into the BIA, these rhythmic patterns can be leads, or they can be percussion, or they can be whatever. So like, so this right now is obviously more of a bassy sound, but if you wanted to make this as well. Right, so you see you can get a ton of information out of that. And so that's why, for me, I wanted this as something that I can really experiment with, because I love using the sequencer in the Swarm and just having it clocked, but having it not necessarily be on time, not quantized to pitch, and just have it be this kind of rogue, random weirdness generator thing that can happen. And I feel like the Proteus can act like that as well. And so I wanted to try that for this next gig with a voice like the BIA, where I can have a ton of flexibility with it and have it be kind of whatever, have it be all over the place. And that's the idea, is to have it be kind of weird and chaotic, so that I can have certain things that are very structured and regimented within my performance, but then also have these things that are more flowy and far out there. So anyway, that's what the Proteus is doing. Let's see here. What do we have? Oh, cool. Lots of questions. Nice acid sound. Thanks. What is that mixer? So this mixer is the BoardBrain Exelon. And this mixer, which you can't see because it's behind my screen, is the WMD Performance Mixer Mark II, which I've been beta testing for them. And I have the Mark I right here, Mark II, and the BoardBrain. So I've got plenty of mixers, mixers all over the place. Let's see here. You have the Mark I. Yeah, Mark I's great. And I used the Mark I for years. I actually used the Mark I right up until I switched to the BoardBrain. And then right after I switched to the BoardBrain, WMD sent me the Performance Mixer Mark II to be part of their beta testing program. So I've been using it, but in my studio rig, because it is really huge. It's like even bigger than this one. And so because it was still a beta test module and it was so big, I kept it in the studio rig rather than taking it out for performance. But it's awesome. It's great too. It does a lot of the same stuff that the Exelon does. There's a lot of kind of cross pollination between the two of them. They each still have some unique things. The WMD has Midi control, which is pretty cool, and you can also send a Midi out, so you can record fader movements, which is pretty sweet. And then it has things like for example, you can switch between, like on here, you can switch between the crossfade and pan with a button. This one's got a switch to use the crossfade and pan. This one, in the WMD, you can choose the pre or post for one of the effects on the front with a switch. This one, you have to select it on the back, so that's a little bit different. This one, so the WMD is now all stereo, which it didn't used to be. Now it is, so that's very much like this as well. This, you don't have the ability with the WMD to do the pre and post fader at the same time out. You can do one or the other. So you have to kind of choose, which is another, difference. But yeah, they're both cool. I mean, they both play really well. The WMD also has Q out, which is really nice. Although the controls for it and the knobs and faders are really super, super tight together, because it's 8 channels and this one's only 6. And so they opted for 6 with this to give you some more room to use to play it. So with that one, the control can be a bit fine, but because of that, you've got more channels. So again, I don't think there's like clearly this one's better than this one as its own mixer. I think what it comes down to is what you want to do with it besides just the mixer part. So being able to have like input modules, output modules, and all of the kind of ecosystem of BoardBrain is the thing that I really love about this. But if you're looking at a standalone mixer, I think it's just a personal preference thing. Like whichever is the one that you really want to go for. WMD is, like I said, is quite a bit bigger, but this one gets bigger if you want to get to that number of channels. So it's just kind of, you got to kind of figure out what you like. So anyway, let's see where we're at here. Greetings from Tijuana. Hey, what's going on, brother? Hope to get down and play with you guys soon. Let's make that happen. For the pizza voice, how do you control VCA gate with the Oxy? No, I don't. So what I do with the pizza has 2 different ways, actually 3 different ways. I think that you can set up this control knob that's here. I set this up as the envelope. So I'm just sending a gate into it. And pitch, and then I'm using the internal envelope control here. So So you can hear that that's like that. When you turn it to the right, it becomes like a traditional envelope. All the way down to just a click. And then when you go to the left, as you turn it down, it opens up the decay, but it also adds attack. I generally use this side mostly because I like the more percussive bit of this. Also, I find that when it's more percussive, it interacts way better with the effects. It's the effects tend to be a little bit mushy when there's not a really direct signal going into it. So that transient reacts really well with the delay. I absolutely love this module. It's kind of like my go-to for leads, just because of that, because you see how it can be really super expressive. Like when you're doing stuff like, you have the expressive control over decay, which obviously you can like build tension in there. With this index, because it's an FM synth, and you're changing the index as one voice modulates one oscillator modulates the other, you can get totally different sounds. And then when you change the wave shape, to just like rock something out really quick. One thing with the pizza though is it can go really far off the rails really quickly. Something that it took me a while to get used to with this is making like really tiny movements, which sometimes is hard because like you're in it and you're dancing and you're having a great time and like you just want to like knock something. And when you do that with this, like you're like, we could be doing this, and then all of a sudden, all of a sudden it just sounds like a mess. So then you have to kind of able to be subtle with it is one of the most important things with that module. Because yeah, it's like the Swarm is the same way. The Swarm can just like totally go off the rails really quickly. So finding those sweet spots and kind of learning where they are and having the self-control to just do subtle changes is really super key with those two modules. Because, you know, other modules, it's awesome. You can just kind of chuck them around and do whatever. That's the thing, like with the Erica Synth bassline, it doesn't really matter. It all kind of sounds pretty sweet, and you can really make big changes, and it's never going to sound really like awful. This can sound really awful really fast. So you have to make sure that you're like paying attention to it, because otherwise it will go totally off the rails. So anywho, what are we doing? Playing the sequencer is what I love about your live sets. Thanks, man. That's what I love about it too. I have a lot of fun doing it. And yeah. Although it's funny because every once in a while I'll get some like hater comment on one of my YouTube things, and they're like, you say you're playing, but you're not really doing anything. I'm like, okay, whatever. You can make your own music the way you want to make your own music. That's all good. Let's see here. Are you using any sort of CV modulation of the voices? You mentioned in one of your earlier streams the inverted envelope from the battering ram, also Belgian, actually. Yes, they are. Very Belgian. They're the cool Belgian modular company is Schachmat that makes the battering ram. So yeah, so the battering ram has an envelope out, and you can invert the envelope by pressing this button. So if it's not like illuminated, it's sending out the actual envelope that's using. And if you do it like that, you're sending out an inverted version. So that's a great thing that we can patch right now if you want. We can go from the envelope output into this attenuator. And I like to put this in 1 because it normals to the ones below it until there's a new input. So if you remember, we have the kick in here so that it's not going too hot into the mixer. So now I've got 1, 2, and 3 that I can all use as outputs from that inverted envelope. Each one of the channels on the mixer has a volume CV that is patchable, that acts, depending on how you set it up in the back, it acts in conjunction with the fader. So the fader still acts as its own thing, and the volume CV that's input here impacts where the fader position is. So for example, if your fader's all the way up, but the CV's all the way down, it's not impacting it at all. If it's halfway up and the CV is all the way down, it's not impacting. But as soon as it starts to come up, it's going to impact it from where it is in that thing. So it's pretty cool when you put in the inverted envelope, you're getting a duck of the volume. So as you bring the volume up, you can duck down that sound. So let's just really quick, this isn't how I'm gonna leave this, but I'll just show this to you. So having that inverted envelope, let's go into the pizza because that's what we were just doing there. So that is 4. So we'll go, into the volume there. So now if we go back to so it's coming out from the kick, but you don't have to have the kick volume up because it's not the actual sound from there. It's the envelope from inside the kick that's going out here. And you notice, you can see the things pulsing red. Red means negative. Yellow is positive, or green or whatever. I guess it goes green when you push it up. But so with the kick, it's a positive signal that you're attenuating. With this one, it's a negative signal that when it's attenuated, you're not sending any out. So if we start to send this out, so let's listen to we did pizza, yeah. So that thing that we were just doing. So now if I start to bring this up, that's my, and I can do it really subtly. As a subtle duck. So it's kind of a cool way to do sidechain. I mean, it's doing the same thing. Basically, all sidechain compression is doing is the kick would trigger the compressor to duck the volume. And what this is doing is it's just sending out an inverted envelope to duck the volume with the VCA that's inside the mixer for that channel. So it's it's super handy, and that's one reason why I have the attenuator here, is so that I can send this out to all of these different channels. So what I basically do when I patch this, we can skip ahead a little. Why not? We're all just hanging out. So if I go out, I'm going to go out from 3 because I'm going to use 1 and 2 for other things. But if I go from 3 to the top of this mult that's right here, now this is all, now I have 6 more inverted envelope outs from this control knob. So now I've got 1, 2 plus 6, that gets me 8 channels. So now I can come into 8 different channels of the mixer, and I can use that to duck. Well, I don't need to duck the kick because the kick is already the kick. And then I have 9 other channels here. So that gets me into those volumes for every one of those 8 extra ones. And then anything that's going in from the Digitact, I take, where is that cable? So I'll take one of these cables, which is 3.5 millimeter to 1/4 inch. I'll just go into 1, which is the pre-fader output of the kick. Then I kind of, when I play my shows, I just kind of pull this around the back so it doesn't get in the way. And then this goes into the left input in the Digitact. And then when you go into the settings in the Digitact, if you go into, if we go into settings, we go down to audio routing, you can see what you want to send to main. So you say yes. So all 16 of these tracks are going to the main output. But then you have the choice of your input left and right and your sends, your delay, your reverb, and your chorus. So delay, reverb, and chorus are all going to the main outs as well. So is the right, in case I wanted to plug in another synth and have it run through here to the outputs. But you notice the left input is not going to the main. So what it's doing, now if we go over here to the compressor page, you can select what type of compressor you want to have, right? So this one would be, if you want to have it sidechain, you just select what track you want. So you've got track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up through 16. And then after 16, you have input left, input right. So I just go to input left and I leave that there. So then when I hit play, if I start to lower my threshold here, you'll see I've got that little trigger there, if you can see that, which you probably can't. I'll move this here. Let me switch to my overhead view. There you go. Now you can see better. So if you see there's a trigger that's coming in there, that trigger is the kick. But the kick's not audibly coming back through the Digitact. It's only the pre-fader coming in, triggering that, and then it's not going as an audio source. So it's just acting as the trigger. So I've got sidechaining capability from every channel from here, from this inverted envelope, and then every channel in here. If I go into the setup mode, you can go down to compressor routing, and you can select which tracks you want that compressor to touch. So if you want all of them, I usually leave one off because I have a kick on one, so I don't want the kick there to duck the kick here. I want them to be able to go together. So you've got, this gives you the ability to control what gets sidechained within this machine, and then the inverted envelope gives the control over what gets sidechained using this mixer. So having a mixer that has VCA per channel that's dedicated to input, that acts in conjunction with the VCA that is for the volume here. Right, so we've got, oh, I unplugged it. I unplugged it because I plugged it into here. So I can go back and take one of these. And again, it can be any one of these. So that's obviously a lot. So you just tone it down a little. And then you've got the same thing going on inside the Digitact. So that's how I do kind of side chaining within the whole setup. And I don't really use side chain in the way that you would if you were producing and using it to kind of duck things to make your mix sound better, because that's just that requires too much control for the for what I'm going to do during a live set. I just don't want to get into that micro level of control. So I'm going to move things out of the way based on frequency spectrum so they don't overlap. I use this as a kind of a performance effect. So like being able to have that kind of pumping, ducking sound, I use that in performance as an effect rather than as kind of like a sound design thing. So that's why I don't have to be as precise as you might want to be if you were in a production setting or using a DAW. So let's see where we at here. 2 Metrons, 2 bitboxes, but my instrument's connected to Symphonion are in a 512 vector. Nice, that's a great setup. I love that, the 512, it's a great sequencer. Love the pattern length in the Metron. Yeah, it's cool because you can go like much longer. Same thing, I have 128 steps in the Oxy, or just go 6400, I don't know. But the point being, I only really use 16 steps, because I like to have everything on one page. I don't like it to change pages while I'm performing. Now, I do sometimes, I shouldn't say always, but that's kind of my default is 16 steps so I can see everything. And then I'll use different probabilities on steps to lengthen out the length of a pattern rather than scrolling over pages and putting triggers on there and trying to do that, because again, none of my stuff is pre-prepared when I'm performing, so I'm writing it live on the fly. So I find that keeping everything to 16 steps and using probabilities allows me to keep everything visually, like in my vision, I can see everything, and so that I don't lose track of where I am in the pattern. So pattern length is not a big deal for me, but it is cool to be able to have that length of pattern in things like the Metron or the Oxy, for sure. What was my first synth and drum machine? So my first synth was a Yamaha SY77, and my first, which was kind of like, it was they came out with it after the DX7. It was an FM synth like that, but they came out with a version that was easier to control. So it was basically like it was FM, but everything was based on macros. So you didn't actually see any of the sound design. You would take presets and then you had a certain number of things that you could adjust on it. And for the music that we were making, that was exactly the sound we needed. My first drum machine was a Boss Dr. Rhythm, which was at about that same time. It was like a drum machine that was made to be kind of an accompaniment to like a guitar player, so it didn't sound very good. But through some pedals, it sounded pretty cool. If you could kind of grime it up a little bit. But yeah, so it was the Boss Dr. Rhythm. And then I also had a 303 that I got from somebody for like, I think I got it for like $75 from this guy. And I sold it like, I want to say 4 or 5 years later. I sold it for, I think, $500. And I thought I just made out like a bandit, because I was like, man, I made so much money off this thing and wish that I would have kept it now. But anyway, that was my first setup. Cases at 1% of ultimate potential and already jamming. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing, is that having a big case doesn't mean using a lot of things. It means having a lot of options of things you can use, right? So I would never, like you took my course, so you know I never usually have more than 3 things going at once besides drums. And so because of that, I just like to have options, and that allows me to easily transition, because I'm not transitioning everything at once. I can just take out a lead and bring in a new lead, and take out a bass and bring in a new bass, and take out a atmosphere and bring in a new atmosphere. So it allows me a lot of control over that, all of that movement, without having to worry about like patterns and saving stuff, and all that stuff is too much of a headache for me. So I'd rather keep it this way, where I could just keep it all simple. But Yeah, the key is having really good flexible voices that you can do a lot of things with that make a lot of great sounds. And so that way you can sound design on the fly and modulate things with your hands and really make things sound really good without having to have a million things going on at once and having your songs be too busy. So let's see here. Cool. Didn't know the pizza had VCA control in it. Yes, it is. If you notice, that's one thing that's kind of a common thread within my case is that I like whole independent voices. So, this has VCA envelope, FM modulation, everything in one. It just needs a filter, and then I'm out. Archer's rig has filter and everything built in. Battering ram has, drive and decay, so it kind of acts like a filter. So I don't need any filter. I don't need. If you notice, this is always something that the modular purist amongst us always notice in my case. There's no VCAs in my case. Like I don't have any VCA modules. So obviously there's VCAs in my mixer per channel. I've got a lot of individual voices that have VCAs in them, but there's no individual modules, and that's on purpose to save me space. So I'll take things like the BIA that has, envelope and wave folding and, octave jumping and harmonics that you can add and all that stuff in one, and then it just goes out to a filter and we're out. Same thing with the Swarm, everything in here, all in one voice, dual filters, and then out. Oxy Choral, same thing, 8 voices, and each one of them, so it's an 8-voice multi-timbral. It has its own built-in filters, envelopes, different effects. It's got reverb, delay, chorus. It has different kinds of synth engines, samplers. So I like to get a lot out of a little space, but the trade-off is always it has to be something that's not menu divey while you're performing. And if you notice, I had the Oxy out of my case for a while because it is very menu divey if you're trying to modify things. But really recently they came out with an interface, an app online, so you can go in and you can set up presets for your Oxy and say, I want preset 1 to have the 8 voices be, 3 of them are FM synths, 1 is a 3-voice VCA, 3 others are samplers, whatever, and you can set it up and you can set parameters like what you want the knobs to control. Save that as preset 1 and put it on the SD card. You can save a bunch of those presets and then you just put the SD card in the front here, and then when you go to play, you just go to that preset and everything's set up to play the way you want it to. So you don't have to get in and modify and change things, which is cool. That's why it's back in my case, because now that I can do that, I set up a bunch of presets in here that I love, and now I can just keep going back to it. So everything has to be able to be really interactive. So like the Warp would seem to be counterintuitive to that because there's so many menus and so many things that it can do. But I would equate it kind of like to the Octatrack, where it's really complex to set up, to get set up the way you want. But then all of these knobs are programmable macros, right? So they can all be individual things. Like it's not, you don't have to have it always be one thing, but you can set it up so that like this is always your filter cutoff and this is always your decay envelope. And so really that way, there's multiple envelopes in here. You can have one knob be the decay control for all of them. And so once you have it set up, which takes a while, like the manual is thick, and then there's a 2.5-hour video that accompanies the manual. So like, I'm still scratching the surface in it because it's a really deep module. But once it's set up, it's super playable and immediate live with a ton of flexibility of different sounds and voices. So that for me is the biggest key, is to make sure that things are hands-on, not menu divey, with a lot of flexibility in sound, but that are whole voices. So I don't need separate VCAs and separate envelopes and all of that stuff. I want that all in the modules that are here. Now, on the other hand, if we look, I'll take this away. So you guys can see my studio modular over here, which here, let me just move this camera so you can see it a little better. So you can see it's a big case. And so with that one, I have a whole bunch of voices that for me are not live voices, right? They're production voices. They're voices that take 15 minutes to dial in and find a cool sound. You know, like the DPO, I absolutely love it, but it's huge, so it wouldn't fit in my case. And it takes a while to dial it in and find that exact sound that you like. So when I do that and I find that thing that I like using outside VCAs and using envelopes and using all that stuff, then I'll take those little things that I make there, and I can sample those and I can load them into machines that I can take with me when I go to play shows, or I can run that into Ableton and I can record those in and use those for productions. So I do have that stuff, but I just don't have it in my performance case because space and, you know, space management is really super important for me. And so that's why we're talking about patching today. So anyway, thank you guys for all the questions, by the way. This is awesome. This is why I love to do this, because I love the Q&A part of this. So let's see here. Good morning, Honey Smack. Good to have you here, brother. Honey Smack is an amazing live artist from Australia who also works for Melbourne Modular. They just came out with this super cool Midi controller, which I can't wait to get my hands on one again. That was super fun at Buchla and Friends. Let's see, what do you like about the Oxy versus other modular sequencing options you've had in the past? So I wanted to keep my sequencing outside because I wanted to have one sequencing place that would sequence not only modular, but hardware, DAW, everything. So I basically was looking at Oxy 1, HapX, and Torso T1. And between those ones, this one just had the best combination of functionality, form. It's small, but it's super well built. It's battery powered, which the other two aren't. So it's great to take with you. It has an incredible amount of connectivity. So it has 8 CV and 8 gate, but it also has 48 channels of outgoing Midi. So you can basically control your whole studio with it if you want. If you have Midi to CV modules for your modular, you can send modulation in there and patch that out via CV. Like, it's crazy, all of that stuff. It has Bluetooth Midi, which is really fun. I travel a lot for my day job, and so I will put an app like AUM on my phone with some synths, and then I can connect this via Bluetooth Midi when I'm on the plane and just pop in my AirPods and sit there and plunk out ideas. And then when I get back to the studio, I can plug those into my big modular, just change the routing, and then it goes into that, and I can record those things in for production. So it's really cool and flexible that way. The biggest feature for me that I love with this is being able to generate random pitch in key separate from gate. So I can put in the gates that I want to get the rhythm that I like, and then I can randomly generate notes for those without it changing where the notes are, where the gates are. So doing an improvised live show, that is incredibly useful because you can just plop that in and you're constantly generating ideas, kind of like what I was doing with the Proteus before. So it's super hands-on. And that's normal. CV and gate separately from one another is normal in the modular world. But with this, I can sequence the Digitact with one-shot samples, and I can put CV and gate separate from one another as well going into the Digitact, which you can't do with the sequencer that's in here. Every note has a trigger, and that trigger has a pitch attached to it. With this, I can put in the gates in here, and then I can adjust the pitch and generate random pitch without adjusting those gates at all, if that makes sense. So it allows traditional hardware synths to act like modular synths, which is another thing that I absolutely adore about it. So, but it's cool. And just the size, portability, it's super well built. So lots of things I love about it. Let's see here. Do you see the Digitact 2? Yes, you do. Absolutely. I want to know how you patch the swarm in your case. Um, yeah, this is going to be the quickest demo ever of how I patch the swarm because it is not complicated. Because as I was talking about a little while ago, I like the swarm to be like my kind of renegade craziness that could just kind of do its own thing. So what I basically do is I take a clock out and I clock it. Wait, where's my clock in? There we go. Clock. There we go. Sorry. So I'll clock it and then I sequence it internally, right? So I'll just start the sequencer. So the sequencer's in time, it's clocked, and then I can just go in and, do what I want with those things. And then this is going through, my output is going into this dual effects from Synth. And then my output, let's take one of these. My output from that will go into input here. Whoa, look how crazy loud that volume got. So then, I can just go in and where you just go in and you start experimenting with, like, I don't quantize it, I don't patch it to modulate, I do that stuff by hand. It's kind of see, it just keeps running. It's kind of a boring patch as far as the actual patching part of it, because one thing you'll notice with this case, and just like there's no VCAs, there's actually no real modulation either. Like I've got the PAMs, which I have different divisions of clock just sending out waves, or they can be LFOs or gates or whatever. And then I do have one quad LFO down here, and that's really it. And I don't patch any of those beforehand because I don't necessarily know what I'm going to play. And so I've got them available, and when I play, I have cables there with me. So if I get an idea, I can just patch an LFO into something and just let it go. But I generally don't, because I prefer, my favorite thing about modular is the hands-on part of it. So I love the fact that I'm the modulation. I like to be the modulation and move stuff. And yeah, you can only do a few things at once, but that's something that kind of forces me to not get overly complicated as well with modulation. Because I think that sometimes people with modular tend to make these like crazy complex patches, but then that's the thing that your modular does, is that crazy complex patch. And then what do? So you have two options. You either change it up and you do different things, or you can basically set it up so that it does everything on its own. So you just kind of press play and then step back and watch the modular do its thing, which neither of those are very fun for me. So what I like is I like to be able to get in there and do the thing. And the funny thing is, it was Honey Smack asking this question, and he is the king of exactly what I'm talking about getting in there and doing the thing. Like when he does his performances, he's not doing like these like subtle little modulations. He's like, fucking jam this thing, do this, make it like fun and rock and roll. And that for me is inspirational. I love that. That's the way I like to play. And that's why I said, like with the pizza, sometimes I have to like tone myself down, because if you do it too dramatically, it goes really far off the rails. But for the most part, I like to be able to just do things like I say to my students, make a decision and move on. Like do your thing and then go with it, and make it, even if it sounds weird, make that weird sound part of the performance. Don't make a weird sound and then be like, oh, that wasn't what I was planning on, because that's not, that expression is you're not expressing yourself through music at that point. You've written something and then you're playing it, but you're not expressing it at that moment, if that makes sense, right? So get in there and mess shit up. Like don't be afraid to twist knobs. Like get in there and make it sound ugly so you can find those weird sounds that you would never find otherwise. Like get in there and make it do stuff. That's what these machines are for. They aren't supposed to be pretty. So anyway, we'll see if Honey Smack agrees with me on this one. Let's see. Thanks for the hang. Got to do some bedtime stories for the kiddos. I get that. I was there at one point in my life. Not anymore there. Much older now. Yeah, the pizzas. You're right, man. That module just blows my mind every time. I actually thought about getting a second one just because I love it so much. I would love to have two of those in my case, but sometimes I just don't have space. Let's see here. No joke. I have dreams where I find 303s at garage sales. Yeah, that's a dream in this day and age. Let's see. Sold my 808 in 97 for $500. Yeah, we all have those regrets. That was about when I sold mine too. It was actually a little earlier. It was probably 93 or so, but yeah. Biggest myth of modular, you don't need VCAs with a good mixer. I totally agree with that. It's amazing how much space, like somebody mentioned earlier, like they get anxiety seeing how much space I'm taking up with my mixer. Well, I challenge you with your mixer and any VCAs that you have, I would be willing to bet that, per channel, you probably take up as much space as I do, if not more, by putting VCAs. Like I've got a quad VCA over here from IntelliGel. I mean, that thing's, what is that, 14 HP, I can't remember, but that's just 4 VCAs. Like for this, I would need 12, so I would need 3 of those. So that's already, 36 HP just for VCAs in order to be able to do stuff. And that's just for this. Like if you're not using modules that have, built-in envelopes, then you need envelopes, and then you need this stuff. So this whole rig is about being as efficient as possible with the amount of space that I have, rather than going, trying to make these super complex voices and using all the cool modules that everybody has. Like I have a lot of the cool modules in my studio case, but they never make it into my performance case because they're just not performance modules. They're not really geared for that. So anyway, the VC8 has 8 in a decent size. Yes, it does. Let's see. Couldn't find much information online regarding the Proteus. Looks like a great generative sequencer. Yes, that's because the Proteus is not out yet. This is a prototype Proteus, the double proto. It will be coming out. We just, in our little Discord chat for the people who are beta testing, I just saw the other day that he's got all the pieces and parts to build out his first batch of release. So it will be out soon. I don't know when. I would say my guess would be this summer if I had to guess, but I guess we have to ask him. Maybe he'll pop into the chat here sometime and we can just ask him off the bat. But yeah, so it's very cool and it's really creative. It's really unique. And that's kind of why I am where I am with this module, is just because of the uniqueness of it. That it's something that's really cool. You know, let's do. So again, you can do stuff like this where you've got like a real simple pattern, and then you can just start adding in notes. Or you can totally change it up, 3 new ones. Yeah, I just love how it stays kind of within a realm, if that makes sense. Like I'm gonna make up some weird shit now. It kind of stays in its own kind of neighborhood. So you're not going wildly off the rails. So for example, when you generate a new pattern, it generates that pattern within 1 octave. So it's not your typical modular sequencer where if you hit generate, it's like all over the place. So it still keeps a certain amount of continuity between things. So that's why it really sounds, I think it sounds great. Something like a breakdown. And then you can come back in. So you can add in notes, you can make it sound more chaotic, or you can take things out. You want to make things sound a little bit more kind of minimal. Like I said, it kind of stays in that same wheelhouse. It's all kind of in the same area. So you're not randomly generating. It's also not Euclidean, so it's exactly the same each time, and you end up with these like 5 patterns that you like. With this one, and then again, you want to generate something new. That's what I found the other day, is just filter this up and generate something new and then drop into a new song. So anyway, you can see that like you can play around, you're kind of moving around the same little area, which gives you a lot of ways to do subtle variation without having it go like totally wild and crazy. And so that's why it's here, is because I really have been enjoying that for kind of creating cool little main leads that are kind of the hook for something that I'm making. So I'm really enjoying it. Can't wait for you guys to try it. When you see it online, it won't look like this though. Like I mentioned, this is the only black one in existence, which was kind of nice of the guy who owns the company. He made me a black faceplate, which was very cool, but it's normally blue. I have the blue faceplate here somewhere. Can't remember where I put it, but it's here. All right, let's see what do we got going here. How does the Proteus compare to the random setting for the track on Oxy? It's a bit different. So what's the biggest difference for me is that once you generate the pattern, the gates are there, and then as you use this density knob, you're adding back in and taking away steps within that existing pattern without changing the pattern. With the Oxy, you can do that, but you have to manually take in and out the steps. And once you take it out and you put it back in, it'll go back in on the root note. So then you need to regenerate it. With this one, if I pull out step 5 by lowering the density, when I increase the density and step 5 goes back in, it'll still be the same note. So you can come in and out of the same pattern. You can make the exact same pattern more or less minimal as you're playing it. So you can go to different variations without losing it and without generating something totally new again. So that's how I'm using it. But then again, it has this thing that I told you about. It has this patience thing where if you turn that down, it will, instead of pressing the button to change patterns, you'll watch the color change from green to pink. And once it gets to pink, it'll change, and then it resets to green, and then it'll stay there for a while, and then it'll reset again. So it's generating new patterns all the time. And if you turn the patience thing down to nothing, it's just basically constantly generating new patterns that are in key. So if you want to do generative music and you're doing stuff at like a slower BPM, or you've got slower triggers, that could be really interesting, because then you're going to be constantly generating new tones within the same key. And depending on the voice that you have it going through, that could be really beautiful. I was watching some of the videos online of some of the beta testers and the way they're using this, and most of them are not playing techno. Most of them are playing kind of more kind of atmospheric ambient stuff, and it sounds beautiful, like really beautiful, the way it generates these patterns. So I think it's going to be a hit. I think that he's got a really cool, clever new thing on his hands. So I can't wait for it to come out. I know there was a little bit of delay because he was displaced by the fires in LA. So it took him a while to kind of get back into doing all the stuff for it. So I'm excited that it's going to be coming out soon. Hopefully, I think he's going to have some of the main modules maybe at Super Booth, but I don't know if it's going to be out yet. So anyway, we'll see. Watch their website. You'll be able to figure it out. Let's see. Where are we at here? Are you using for the rumble? How do you patch that? I actually don't have any rumble going on right now. So what I do if I want to do a rumble is I'm much more into sequencing them. So this is just a really bassy kick drum. It's one of the things that I love. Man, I'm clipping. Sorry about that. It's one of the cool things about the battering ram is that you can get these, like, I can take down the transient and take down the drive and make it sound like a 808. Or I can tighten that up. Make it sound more like an overdriven 909. So it does a lot. So I don't need a lot of rumble because I have a real subby bass if I want it. But if I was going to do a rumble, I can tighten this up. And then that's why I have a kick over here on the D-tact. So I'll use track 1 and I'll sequence rumble patterns rather than doing them with effects, because it's just really difficult within a modular case to get the right effects chain in parallel with the original kick in order to make that work. So I will generally sequence them in here. So that's what I have here. So if I wanted something to be like more of a traditional rumble, I would just do. I can just bring the level down. So you can get something similar. You can, because it's in the Electron, it's pretty easy to adjust velocity. So if you just go into your trig page, you can lower down the velocity, and then you can copy those and paste them over. And that gives you higher velocity on the 3, 7, 11, and 15. So it gives you that kind of bounce of a rumble, but it drops it down on the steps before and after that. So it allows you to be able to do that if you like it. But I generally do not. I prefer to have kind of more of a groove than kind of a set rumble, just for the type of music that I do. So I like to have that interact with other kind of percussive stuff. Just a kind of straight 4-on-the-floor kick, and then have the this bouncing around like that. Another thing that I do sometimes with that this track is I'll have it on all 16 steps, but then I'll send that sidechain to it. So whatever I'm doing here, I can just go into this. Do I have it set up? Yeah. So you can see how if it's on 16 steps, it'll take out whichever steps are triggered by the sidechain. So then if I was to change this up and do something more, it's going to duck the step that the kick is on. So it's always going to fit with that if you do it this way. But again, to do something like that, you have to have the ability to sidechain. So if you can sequence a secondary kick on 16 steps, and that will give you the ability to have it sound like a rumble without having to use the effects. Because then you can put the effects on this, right? So like, here, I'm going to take this off now. So then you can put the effects on here. So if you want your kind of typical reverb and delay, you can put those on here, and then you just have your kick that goes with it. Right, or if you're doing like the 16th version. Right, so you see there's like a bunch of different ways that you can do it. This way you kind of keep control over both pieces of it, rather than trying to come up with some convoluted effects chain for your kick, going into reverb, going into delay, making sure the delay timing is correct for the the track that you're doing, like the tempo of what you're doing, that the reverb is EQ'd correctly so that you're not getting that. Then you want to be able to side chain the effects chain, but not the kick itself. So there's like a ton of stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff that's really super easy if you're doing it in a DAW and you just kind of build an effects chain on a track. But when you're trying to do it with hardware and a modular, it is a freaking nightmare. So that's why I avoid that. I mean, I'm like less and less using rumbles just because I feel like they're just so overused now. Like every track is just rumble kick, rumble kick, rumble kick. So I don't use them nearly as much as I used to. And because of that, I find that I rather do things like what I was just showing you, where if I take these effects back off again, where I've got something going more like this. Because again, if I start to bring in other fun groove that I can really control the actual groove itself along with the kick. I can keep the kick 4 on the floor very powerful, right? Then all we have to do is kind of bring in something like what we were just messing with before. Everything out really well because this is only in the mids and high mids. We've got low end percussion and then some high clicky percussion and hi-hats. So everything's kind of staying out of everybody's way. So then you can have cool stuff like this. Then, you know, we've got stuff like what we were doing before with the pizza. So anyway, that's how I do it. I don't generally do rumbles. I generally do like kind of a funky secondary kick instead of doing a rumble, or like a low tom. Sometimes it's a sub bass, it depends. But I like the more of a sequenced pattern that plays off of the kick and gives a low end groove rather than just an effects chain type of delayed reverb rumble. So anyway, let's see where we at here. So no, I wasn't using the Desmodus. I guess that answers the question. The Desmodus is for the warp. So I'm running the warp through the Desmodus and into there. So that's what that's for. Let's see. Thanks for going through all of this. Super helpful as always. You're welcome, Peter. Hope to hang out again soon. Appreciate breaking down the thought process. Yeah, I just feel there's not enough of that out there. Too many people are like, look what I can do, rather than like, here's how I do this in case you want to get inspired to learn something and do it yourself. I would rather people were doing this on their own and not just watching me. Let's see. I spent too much on black replacement faceplates. Who are you talking to here? Look at this case. Like, what did I get faceplates for? So, Coslin, Pam's, battering ram, Archer's rig. I guess that's it. It's not too bad right now. Over here I have some as well. Another Pam's. Yeah, I guess it's not too bad. I mean, some of them I actually got the black version on purpose, but then there's some companies that don't do a black version. Like the Shockmont only does silver panels. So if you want black panels, you have to get them from somebody else aftermarket. You can't buy a black version of that. And I don't know, you may be able to buy a black version of the Proteus when it comes out. I know he's been digging how it looks, so there may be a black version at some point. We'll see if we can do like a Circo signature edition of the black Proteus. That would be pretty funny. So let's see. Sorry about the question. It was a bit broken apart. No, don't worry about it. Like, don't worry. I'm super smart. Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you. Not very realistic, but very kind. Thank you. Let's see what else. Jan, you mentioned in an earlier stream that the Archer's rig was more tonal perk than just hat. Yeah, absolutely. So I love the Archer's rig, and that's another one that I want to get a second one of just because of how useful it is. So actually, it just lets you hear it in context here with that kind of groove that we had. So right now, I just because wasn't using this before, I set it up as kind of a 909 hat. So I'll take this hat out. Like that, but it has a bunch of internal voices. So if you want, like right now, I've got it filtered way up, so it's only taking the high end. But if I take this filter all the way down, so that sounds more like open hat, right? But if I change voices, now this is an FM voice. So I can make this be a hat as well, right? This is what it's supposed to be for, right? To be a hat like this. But if I pitch it down, basically for anything that is a percussive tonal sound that you want to be able to control decay on. That's what I love this for, right? So you can go all through those voices, and you can see like the sine always sounds like kind of a clean tone. That bell always sounds like a bell. Then you've got like a noise one, which is this. It almost sounds like a detuned stab, which I think is very cool. This one's supposed to be the 808 hat, which if you so you can still make it sound like a hat. Like they all sound like hats when you're at this level, right? Different versions of hats. But then all you have to do is like start to right? So anyway, ton of flexibility, amazing module for percussion, for hats, for yeah, all kinds of stuff. So I love it. And I actually thought about if I was to put a second one in the case, which I don't know where I would put it at this point, but if I was to put a second one in the case, I would actually use a second one as hi-hats while I use this as that. Then I wouldn't need to have hi-hats in the detect. So that would save me some space. So we'll see. We will see what it ends up being. So where are we at here? Currently using my Akai Force for rumble effects chain, or using a low tom with a boomy kick and add some groove. Yeah, if you've got something like the Akai Force is basically like Ableton in a box. So you can make effects chains when you're using a computer like that. But when you're trying to do it in hardware, it's just really, really complicated. So that's why I stay away from it because it's too much of a pain in the butt. Let's see here. James scooped an Archer's Rig kit. Nice. Nice. I have yet to brave the world of DIY modular, but we'll see. Mine arrives tomorrow. Oh, sweet. Well, now you see a little bit of what you can do with it. It's pretty cool. So, anyway, chuck some more questions in the chat here. And I'll be happy to answer those. So you can kind of see where we've gotten as far as patching this. We kind of got off of our whole patch thing, but you got the important parts about how we use lanes, trying to keep the things as short as you can, using longer cables to wrap other cables so that you can keep things a bit more organized. The only thing we didn't really talk about is the sends, which is a little bit important in this setup. I'll patch these without doing the super tidy patch just so that you can see those. But what I'll do is I will take effects send 1 and take this out to the Causalin. So left and right, because it's a frequency shifter that shifts based on left and right. This is not how I would patch this, by the way, because this is going over this, but I'm just going to show you guys so you can see what we're doing here. I'm going to take the effects off of this. Let's use something that's a little more. So that's going to be going out to the Causalin on effects 1. Then I'm going to do the returns from the Causalin. I bring those into their own channel so that I've got volume control over that. So I bring those into 8. And then it goes through its own filter as well. So now if I bring the Causalin up, you won't hear anything. But if I start to send from send 1, take all this other stuff out of here. So that's like straight signal. Then we start to frequency shift. And then I can do things like add some wave folding in here. Oh, you know what? My problem is that I'm not going into my filter. That's my problem. See what happens when you try to do this too quick? All right, so I'm gonna go from the out here to the in on my filter. So the interesting thing is right now, that's the Archer's rig going in there, but it's pre-fader on effects 1, so I don't need to have the Archer's rig up. I can send it without having the original. So that gives me its own voice. And then what I can do is I can send other things as well. So let's see, like the pizza, let's send a little bit of that to it as well. So those are both mixed into that. Let's send a little bit of the BIA. So that's all going in here. Now let's frequency shift. So again, that gives us its own unique voice that doesn't have any of the originals, but then you can bring in the originals. And it acts as its own new unique voice that's being made up from parts of the other voices. So that's how that send works. And then the other send that we do, effects send 2, this one goes to, and again, this is not how I would patch this, but this goes over to the Endorphins Ghost. And then that one actually comes back into a normal return. So let's just patch into the 2 for there. We're going to come into effects return, I don't know, 1, because 1 was coming back into there, so whatever. So now I can do things like, again, let's go back to a simple sound. The other thing I need to do is I need to clock the Ghost. So let's just send a clock signal from the PAMs into the clock in here. Make sure it's not too totally out of whack. I've been moving stuff around so much. Set it kind of like I like it. Okay, so now if we start to, I'll leave the Ghost up. This is the volume for that. Now if we start to add a little bit of the send, so that's just the Archer's rig, unaffected, going into the Ghost. But just like with the Cosline, so if we send a bunch of random things to the Cosline again, like we did before, because the Cosline's coming into its own channel, that means it has effect sends as well. Now, I won't touch effect send 1 because that will give me awful feedback that will blow you all out. But what I can do is I can send this cool, interesting new voice. I can send this to the Ghost as well. can change delay time to give it like cool effects. I can move the filter to pick up different harmonics. Right, so you see that gives you a lot of cool stuff for the sends. That's why I don't do just like delay and reverb on the sends, because I want it to be able to make interesting new voices and atmospheres and things like that from the things that I have coming through the mixer, rather than just sending the mixer through a delay, because I can do that with individual modules, and I would rather do that by module rather than having an effect send for it. Just because keeping in small amount of space, rather than having a whole bunch of atmospheres that I have pre-recorded and looped on a sample player. This way I can just generate atmospheres from anything. So like if we go back to this, and then we send that through the Ghost. Creates a cool atmosphere based on where the bandpass filter is. It's going to pick out certain harmonics. So right now it's kind of in the middle, but if I want something higher, I just move the filter, and then it's going to pick out different harmonics to run through the effects chain. Or if I wanted to double up on the low end stuff, you can add little blasts of frequencies to go through there. So if we change the index and open up the envelope at the same time, it just sends a blast of frequencies through the Ghost, which tails off. So it creates a bunch of cool stuff. So then if we're swirly stuff that's happening from going through the Ghost. So being able to shoot through just little blasts of harmonics, the Ghost reacts really amazingly to that. So that's why that's like one of those modules that I just could never live without, because of all the cool stuff that it does and everything that it adds to my performances. So anyway, so that's how I do the sends. So Let's see, any more questions in here? Let's see. Super smooth build. Thanks, man. Psyched to see Circle Jams in Colorado Springs next weekend. I am psyched to jam in Colorado Springs next weekend. That's going to be super fun. And don't forget, during the day, I'm doing a workshop. So I'll be doing a walkthrough of this kind of stuff and how I do this live and up close and personal. You can come up and ask questions. I can show you stuff like close so you can see what I'm doing better than you can see with the cameras here. So yeah, I'll be doing that. And then I'm playing the closing party at night. If you attenuate your modulation, you can make it smaller. Well, yeah, of course you can make it smaller with attenuation, but that's kind of not the point, is that I would have to have modulation with attenuation for every single knob on this thing to be able to do modulation like that. And because I'm improvising when I play, I don't know what I'm going to play. So I can't set it up in advance because I don't know what I'm going to use. And so that's why I need modules that I can jump into. I can reach into them and make the modulation and make it be really subtle. Because for me, it's way easier to make a subtle knob movement than it is to go, LFO with random wave or with this wave going into an attenuator, out from that into a VCA, it's just a hassle. And for me, I'm looking for stuff that's very immediate, stuff that, like, when I get an idea when I'm playing live, because I'm writing the music live in front of the crowd. So when I get an idea live, I need to be able to jump on it rather than going in and coming up with new ways to do the attenuation. So yeah, I have, for example, if you look right here, I have a quad LFO right next to a quad attenuator. So if I want to do something randomly in a show, I can do that. And that's something we didn't patch, but I generally just leave these patched. So I'll just put 1 into 1, 2 into 2, 3 into 3, 4 into 4. And so that way I can adjust speed of LFO and then attenuation with the faders on the 410. So I can get that if I choose to, but I have to tell you, 95% of the time, this goes unused and it just sits there ready in case I want it. And like sometimes when I play, I'll have I generally leave cables here just like this, laying here in case I want to patch something, in case I get an idea for modulation. Or a lot of these modules have FM inputs. So every once in a while, I'll get an idea where I'm going to be like, oh, I'm going to take the extra out for that and put it into the FM on this and just make some weird shit. I have no idea what it's going to sound like. So I'll do stuff like that. But in general, it's not my preference. But again, it all comes down to how you perform. So if that's, I know that a lot of people like to create evolving sounds, evolving patches that they can then play from there. And there's going to be a certain amount of evolution that it does on its own because of the modulation that you've set up, and then a certain amount that you play on your own. And I totally get that. My case is, in order to have the number of voices that I want to have in my case, it's really difficult to have the space for all of that kind of modulation. And again, it's half that, and it's half that I don't really like modulation. I guess I shouldn't say that because everybody's gonna be like, modular, people are gonna freak out. But I don't really like modulation because I like to be the modulation. I don't like to sit there and watch my rig do something. I like to be able to interact with it and do things with it. So for me, I prefer those kind of subtle modulations. Because like, for example, when you just heard those little blasts that I was putting through, that was a subtle change on one and a subtle change in the other direction on another. So I would have needed 2 different modulation sources with 2 different attenuators just to do that little move. And then I would still need to go to the attenuator to do it. So I'd rather just kind of get in there and make the move with the actual synth itself. But again, personal preference. I have great friends that set up these amazing patches and they play them like a dream, and they have all this modulation and crazy cross modulation stuff that it's doing, and it's just not the way I play, but I fully respect what they're doing because it's way more complicated than what I'm doing, for sure. Way more complicated. Let's see. Just an FYI for others. I know, I get it. Doing full chord progressive trance on your modular. Yeah, it's very different style of music. So yeah, if I was doing stuff that was a lot more kind of sweepy, long sounds, I would probably need to do the same kind of stuff. But I don't. All my stuff is very monophonic and very plucky, so that I have kind of individual control over sounds rather than trying to fight with it. But anyway, let's see. Where is that going to be in Colorado Springs? I actually don't know. I think it's called Electro Wave. So if you go onto their website, I think there's a website for it. It's through the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and the Colorado Modular Synth Society. So I think if you go to any of those sites, you'll probably be able to see it. I'm not exactly sure. If only we had 6 hands. I know, it's crazy. PAMs into attenuation into BIA creates, yeah, for sure. You know, that's one of the reasons why I have stuff like the PAMs and some, random LFOs here, because yeah, it's fun to do that stuff, but I enjoy doing the stuff for a couple reasons. Like I said, I like it, but also that allows me to say, oh, if I do this, it makes this. So then I have that as kind of muscle memory, and I can go back to it again. And I don't have to just leave modulation happening. It can happen only when I want it, and then not again, without having to kind of turn it on and off all the time and remember which modulation is going into which thing. So, but yeah, PAMs is great for that. That's why I have a PAMs in both. I used to have 2 PAMs in my travel case, just because it's like, that's such a crazy powerful module to just send out stuff. Like whatever, and you can quantize with it, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. So yeah, it's a sweet module. That's one of those I would never get rid of it modules. I am the modulator. Yes, that is it. That should be my performance name. I am the modulator. PAMs into Sweet 16 for attenuating. Yeah, that's great. You tried any of the other firmware for the Versio line? Yeah, I was actually mentioning that early on because over the last few days, actually, I've been flashing a bunch of them to different things. In my last iteration of this case, I had BIA going into Dismodus, into the Melodis Versio, the one that's the granulizer or granulator or whatever you call it, to create atmospheres, which was really super fun. But then when I added in the warp, I wanted some effects for that. So that's why I moved this over, and I decided to go to the Yester for this one, because I just think it fits really well with what I'm doing with the Proteus. I just think it's a cool combo of these types of relatively simple sequences going into a voice that has this much expressive sound with the wave folding and all that, going into that filter. So, but I'm a huge fan of the Versio stuff. I mean, the noise engineering stuff in general, I love this new direction they've taken over the last few years of making these platforms that you can get. So, like, for example, when I wanted the Dismodus, because I needed a reverb for my case, and I really wanted that one in particular, I was looking for one. They were sold out. I went to Perfect Circuit and they were sold out, but on their used section, they had one of the other ones. I can't even remember what it was. I think it might have been the Melodis, but it was a different one, and it was on sale. And I was like, okay, well, the other one's just sold out. So I'm just going to get this one and flash it and make it the other one that's sold out, which is such a great option. You can buy any of them and then you have any of them, which I think it's such a cool thing. And the same goes for the Aaliyah. I actually hope to try, I want to get the Manus Ateritas Aaliyah. So then if it ends up being something that I really like, well, I'll keep it as the Manus, but if it's not, maybe I'll just flash it and make it another BIA. So then I can have 2 of them and have them do different kind of stuff. So I just love the flexibility, because I think all of us that are into modular find ourselves in that world where we're never kind of satisfied. It's never the end. We've never finished our rig. And so being able to have modules that can be very easily converted into other modules, I think is a great idea, and it's a great direction because, this week I may need a reverb, next week I may need a delay, the next week I may need a filter, the next week I may need a multi-band compressor, and the Versio can be all of those things. And so I think it's awesome. And they even have, if you go on their website, you can buy packs of all of the faceplates, so that whenever you flash it over, you can just change out the faceplate and then you have the actual module. It's not like you have to guess what the things are. So they have overlays too, but I actually like the faceplate pack because then you can have the real thing. And, it's very cool. I just think it's a great idea. Hats off to them for doing it, because I think what they're doing is very cool. And it allows a lot of flexibility for people like me who are very indecisive. Let's see. I've used the PAMs and 410 for Euclidean sequencer and quantizer. Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, it's crazy how many different things the PAM can do. Like, I'm using it super basic right here. It's basically just a clock divider, and sending out different divisions and multiplications of clock depending on where it's going. But I've still got 5 slots empty, and so I usually put those slots as different divisions of the clock with just, maybe it's a sine wave, or maybe it's a square wave if I want something gated. And then when I'm performing, if I just want to put something in, I can just plug it in and have modulation really quick. So yeah, it's very cool. It's one of those super powerful modules for sure. Super duper flexible. All right, where are we at here? Any more questions from anyone about any of the setup or how I'm doing stuff or why I'm doing stuff? I think that's usually the big thing. Like, why in the hell would you do that way? It's funny. I was talking to a friend once. Actually, we were at KnobCon and we were looking at a bunch of different modular rigs. And I was saying that for me, anytime you see somebody's modular setup, it's kind of like a snapshot into their brain. You can kind of see how their head works. And I love it. Like, when you look and you see somebody's rig and you're like, oh yeah, like I see how you do that. And I see how different that is from the way I would do it, which I love. I love the fact that we can all take exactly the same gear and mix and match it in different combinations and have it be a totally new instrument, and then have a person play that instrument in a totally different way than anyone else would. So it just makes everything so completely unique and so unlike anything else. You can only make, the traditional gear that you can only make a 909 sound so many ways, for example, or, different synths. Like you listen to a Percons, which I love, the Erica Synths Percons. It all sounds like a Percons, like what it is, which is great. It sounds awesome. Just like a 909, it sounds great, but it is what it is. And so no matter who plays it, it's still going to have that same core that what it is. And people will play it differently, but it will still sound like a 909. Whereas with modular, this case will not sound like any other case that exists or has ever existed. And on top of that, everyone would play it differently. So it's just like this infinite source of uniqueness and customization to make it play the exact way you want. Even talking about the black faceplates, like you can even make it look exactly the way you want. You can make your cables color coded or all black or whatever. You have customization, and that for me is just what makes modular so amazing, is that it's not only are you playing an instrument and expressing yourself uniquely through it, but you've made that instrument in a unique way that no one else has ever either. So yeah, one of my favorites. Let's see, the ability to swap firmware has to be sold on the Versio. Yeah, it's badass. I don't know why I would get any other effects at this point. Trying to decide between a Versio module or the Ghost. Yeah, man, there's no Versio module by itself that does what the Ghost does, right? So they're not interchangeable. It just comes down to which one you need more. Like the Ghost is, man, it's its own thing. And I don't think, my performances wouldn't sound the same without it because I use it so much. So yeah. I only wish the Exelon had Q headphone outs. I mean, it does if you use the monitor. Like that's the thing, is they didn't include it for everybody because not everybody wants it. That's one of the really cool things with the whole board brain system, is that if you want things, you can add them on. And if you don't want them, you don't have to take up space with them. And that's one of the big pluses for me. So let me pull this out. So like, here's the monitor that I had from, that I was using before. So this connects, so you take your main outs and you connect them into here. And then you have TRS balanced outputs, but then you also have a headphone cue and you have a volume knob with metering, and then you can adjust the individual channels individually. The other thing that's cool too is that you can mute the output. So like if you go and do a sound check, you can get everything all set up, but then if you want to mess with stuff, you could just mute the output here and still listen to the headphones, and it's not putting anything out the mains, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, so this, you can just have this, like I used to have this in my case right here. And so having the ability to output like this is great. And the other thing that's cool with this monitor is this is a 2-channel stereo mixer as well, with a VCA per channel. So this can be standalone without the mixer. So if you just want to have a mixer that has a headphone cue and volume knob, this can be a 2-channel stereo or 4-channel mono mixer just on its own, which is pretty sweet as well. So anywho, what else? I find my setup has a lot of noise floor and I hate it. Anyone advice on how to remedy this? Yeah, it's the couple things. It depends on the individual modules. So one thing, it's really funny. Let me see if you can hear it here. If I turn this, can't really hear it right now. Yeah, there's a crazy loud noise floor of the Ghost, which is funny. It's like, it's always stupid loud. And now, of course, you can't hear it at all because of the way I have this. But yeah, this is a really noisy module. And for me, it doesn't matter because like, I don't mind the type of music I make. It's fine having like all kinds of static and weird sounds and stuff. But yeah, if you're doing stuff that has to be really precise, watch out for the Ghost, because it is one for sure that will add a lot of noise floor. Anything that has these kind of like, you know, distorted circuits or analog stuff that's right next to other stuff, you're going to get weird noise floor stuff. I will say the Exelon mixer has the lowest noise floor of any mixer I've ever seen. Like they were obsessive about getting this to be super, super, super low noise floor. So that's a plus for that mixer for sure. Let's see here. I have an Endorphins Golden Master and not sure if it's causing this. Yeah, I mean, I don't have the Golden Master, but I have messed with it a little bit. I don't know if it is or not. Hard to say, but like, I don't know. Let's see. If you're hearing any of that stuff, but yeah, it's they can be pretty loud. The Ghost for sure. I don't know about the Golden Master. I don't know. Does it have? I think it has saturation in it, so that could cause it. But yeah, it kind of depends on the individual module that the sound is coming from. But yeah, it can be that. It can be modules that are next to each other that are interfering with one another. It can also be your power supplies in your modular case. This case that I have, which is from Morph Modular, it has in the rails on the inside, the power rails, you can set the rails to, you can set the individual power points to different settings based on whether it's an analog or a digital synth. And so you can put things on different circuits so that they don't interfere with one another. And you can also set them to power up in series if you have a lot of really high draw modules that if they power up at the same time, they overload the system. And this way you can have them load up at different like in sequence rather than all at the same time. So power management within your case is obviously a big deal as well. Let's see. I use a lot of mults. Yes. So especially if you're using just regular mults and not buffered ones. So that's going to degrade signals. And so as you go through there, you're going to have a degraded signal all the way through each time you mult it out. But with a buffered mult, you won't, because it adds power to it. So it'll keep going in the same amount. So yeah, maybe. What else? Golden mass driver compressor. Yes, it does. Which small case would you recommend? How small? For me, this is a small case. So this is a big case. This is a small case. But it all depends on what you're looking at. I have down below here, I have a 6U104 and I have a 6U84, which is basically one section of this. Each one of these is 6U84. But this one is set so that I can fold it for travel. I don't know if you'd seen that, like, you see, this folds up this way. So that way, you can pull the light off here, which I don't need right now. So that way I can travel with this, and it all fits into a case. I can take it on in a carry-on, and then open it up, and it's all patched and ready to roll. So, yeah, so it all kind of depends on what size you're talking about. 6U84, I love the Erica Synths one. It has these little side cheeks that are wood that kind of make it sit at an angle. But I took those off and it just made the case even smaller. And when I was traveling before with that one, it fits in one side of a rolling carry-on bag. The 6U84 does, without the side cheeks. And so that way you can put it in one side of a rolling carry-on and put like clothes and stuff in the other side when you travel, if you're just going for a day or two for a show and you don't need a ton of clothes. And that way you only have to take everything carry-on that way. This whole thing fits into a carry-on, but it's the only thing that fits in the carry-on. This with the Oxy and the power supply, and that's it. And then I put these two boxes in my backpack, and then that's how we roll. Let's see here. Process of elimination. Yeah, good idea. Process of elimination, and just figure out, if I unplug this, is it still loud? If I unplug this, is it still loud? Yeah, being able to do that kind of one by one is helpful. But yeah, I suspect, start with those mults and see if that's what's causing it, because that might be degrading your signal so much that it's acting staticky, making too much noise. All right. Any more questions out there? Anyone else? Anyone? Anything else you want me to show you in the case or play for you so you can hear? I know there's a lot of weird stuff in here, and we don't have everything totally patched, but it's mostly there. This is still a huge mess. Like, all this stuff I just patched really quick to show you. So this will all go into the same method of like, move this all around, get this over to the side so that it's not, getting in the way and all that kind of stuff. So we'll figure out how to make all that look pretty. But what else? Yeah, so I'll tidy this up a bit. So this isn't exactly how it will be, but you get the idea. Try to keep your stuff out of the way of the faceplates so that you can get to everything. At least that's the method I do. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there's other people that will patch like this, and because you've got the flexibility to be able to really easily reach through and get to stuff, which I totally get. Like, that makes sense in one sense. I just like to have it like laying down so that I can see everything really well and I'm not kind of digging through stuff, but I totally understand the other way. It's just a matter of, personal preference, how you want to manage your cables. But yeah, definitely do your own thing. What else? Crazy the amount of sound you can get out of something that has really rich harmonics, like the BIA, wave folding going through the viola arena, wave folding. Then when you start to go into something like a delay, it picks up all those weird little harmonics. Anyway, let's see. Any more questions for today? Otherwise, yeah, let's see. We've only been on here 3.5 hours. Cool. Well, thank you guys very much for hanging out. I appreciate it. It's always great to share my random afternoons of doing this stuff, where instead of me being by myself in my basement doing this stuff, I can at least hang out and talk with you guys and hopefully help you guys with anything you might be struggling with to try to do similar kind of stuff, give you some ideas of something that you might want to do. So definitely take it for whatever it's worth, and hope you guys all got something out of this. I appreciate it. If you're interested in doing either one of my classes, the March sessions are both live right now. So if you were to sign up today, all the videos are live. There's about 50 videos per course that are unique to the courses. You can jump right on and get started with those. And then we do twice weekly group calls, and the first one starts on Wednesday. So you wouldn't have missed anything if you jump in. There's a little discount right now, and anybody who signs up right now for either the March course or the April course, at either of the two that are available. If you sign up today or tomorrow, you get an additional one-on-one. So the courses come with one-on-one lesson, and if you sign up now, you get 2 one-on-ones. So, and you can schedule those anytime you want. We can talk about whatever you want. We can go over your setup. We can, critique your live rig. We can talk through how to route your cables, like whatever you want to do. Like, we can go through any of it. We can go through specific modules, whatever you'd like. So if you get signed up, like I said, today or tomorrow, you get an additional one-on-one, which is a pretty good deal. And there's a little discount for signing up right now. I think there's 25% available on the website. So go to circlelive.com/courses, or click the link in the video description, and that'll take you right there. And you can jump right in. I'd love to have you there. One is improvised live performance, which is basically what we've been talking about here. And the other course is a hybrid production course. So basically using live rigs and live performance to track those into your DAW, and then how to use the DAW to kind of manipulate that and make it into the best thing that it can be. And then also going the other direction, how to make things in your DAW, samples and loops and individual sounds and whatever, that you can then load back into certain pieces of gear in your live setup. So then you can use things you made in the DAW live, and you can use live to make things in the DAW, and kind of doing that whole circle of hybrid performance, production, performance, like going back and forth between those. So if you're into that, go ahead and get signed up now. I would love to have you on there. We've got a couple spots available for each one of those courses. And these are going to be the last 2 until summer, because I've got a bunch of stuff going on after April. So sign up for one of these if you want to do it now. And if for some reason it doesn't work out, I can always push you to a later course once they go. It's really easy for me to switch once you sign up. So take advantage of the discount and take advantage of the extra one-on-one by signing up now. And then we can always push you later if you'd like. So anyway, hope you got something out of this. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned something, or got some inspiration to get out there and do something with your own gear. I hope that would be wonderful. I do appreciate that you guys chose to spend your time with me. Thanks. I mean, time is precious. So if you chose to spend it here, that means a lot. So thank you guys very much. Hope to see you on the next one. And in the meantime, I'm going to keep making music. Hope to see you in Colorado Springs this weekend, in Berlin, May 1st, in Brussels, May 2nd, at Super Booth, May 8th and 9th, and then again in Berlin on the 10th. So be over there for a bunch of stuff. I still have a couple dates open, so if you're in Europe and you know somebody who wants to book an act, I'll go pretty much anywhere in Europe. It's pretty easy to move around once you're over there. So let me know if there's anything available for those dates. I know I have a free date on the 3rd of May, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, which some of those are weekdays and might be a little bit more difficult. 3rd's a Saturday. So if there's any of those available, please let me know. Connect me with your local promoters. I'd love to do that. Otherwise, thanks very much, and hope to see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.